like to call the June 7 study session to order. I would like to please note that all board members are present except Dr. Mariam Hamakani, and I think she will be joining us shortly. At this time, we would like to do our Pledge of Allegiance, and we do not have anyone joining us tonight, so if you'll please stand, and I will lead the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. With us.
Oh, wow.
We are going to move on to 1.03, Honoring Excellence, and Dr. Travis Shaw is here to assist us with that.
Well, good evening. Tonight we have with us special guests who are here to honor Springfield Public Schools for efforts to increase energy efficiency, achieve financial savings, and reduce environmental impact. For more than 6 years, SPS has partnered with Synergistic, a national energy conservation company, to effectively manage its energy use. As a result, SPS has reduced energy costs by 24%. Along with other efficiencies, SPS now has healthier, more efficient buildings which benefit our students and staff. These efforts have also resulted in SPS earning Synergistic's Best in Class award. It is my pleasure to introduce representatives from Synergistic to tell us more about this partnership and to present the award. If you guys will just give a wave, we have with us Joseph Puzo and Quentin Hamp. They are both our energy specialists that are out in our buildings every single day, weekends, evenings, holidays, you name it, they take care of it. We have with us Drew Rhodes, who handles a lot of the number side of things, and then Jesse Coulter, who's our newest client manager. Jesse's been with Synergistic and this team for more than 6 years. He was an energy specialist and has been recently promoted to client manager, so I'm going to turn it over to Jesse for the presentation.
Good evening, board. Thanks for having us here. So I'm just going to kind of read some things that we've accomplished here, and then we're going to recognize some awards. So this dedicated partnership, like Dr. Shaw said, started over 6 years ago to create healthier, more efficient buildings for the SPS, earning SPS the Best in Class recognition. This is something other districts across the country strive to achieve. Through the leadership of the board, Dr. Latham, Dr. Mulford, Dr. Shaw, Mr. Cox, Mr. Getz, and the energy specialists, Quentin and Joe, in active collaboration with district leadership from custodial, nutrition services, project management, building leadership and staff, we've realized a 32% energy reduction through the district over those 6 years. This has impacted the environment by equal to taking over 10,000 vehicles off the road. As Dr. Shaw stated earlier, that's a 24% total cost savings. So first, we want to recognize two individuals from SPS. I'd like to ask Richard Cox and David Getz to come up. Dr. Getz, like that. These individuals, along with their maintenance and operation team, are relied upon daily as part of the energy management team with Quentin and Joe to achieve these goals and ensuring that SPS is a best-in-class award recipient. So we have some certificates for them, and also we're going to give them the best-in-class obelisk as well. So. We also want to recognize the efforts of each building in the district, so we're going to be providing a poster that these energy specialists will be delivering. So these will go to every single building with their building name, and they'll be able to put these up throughout the district. And then I'm honored to present the Best in Class Award banner that recognizes the conservation of our nation's precious resources by implementing the energy program optimizing energy performance, and serving as a model of energy stewardship in school districts around the country. And so this banner is will be going to the district as well. And the last part of this is for the best in class. We're donating $2,500 to the Foundation for Springfield Public Schools. We asked Natalie to come, and we'll be giving her that check as well.
Awesome.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions? At this time, any board members have any questions? Because, come back up for just a minute.
I just want to say something.
Because I was on the board whenever when we started this process. And I know it didn't happen without some angst among some of our staff from the process
Absolutely.
that was put in place, and some of the things we asked some of our teachers and some of our staff to do differently to achieve this. So I think we need to talk a little bit more, or maybe just talk a little bit more about how amazing this award is, that here we are 6 years later and receiving this, and what it means just overall to other districts in the country and what it means for Springfield. And I know you touched on it a little bit in terms of the 32% energy reduction, but that's a really big deal from where we started.
Absolutely. When we came here, we did have some hiccups. Working, it's different to get in and ask people to change some of the habits that they may have had over the past 10, 15, 20 years. And we came in, but I think we got past those things, and now it's just, we go in, we talk with people, we help them. Obviously, with Richard and David behind us, we can reach out and get things fixed quickly that maybe have been lingering and that kind of thing. And especially with these gentlemen going in on weekends at night, in the middle of the night, and on vacation, Memorial Day, these guys did probably 40 audits at least, getting in those buildings, making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
And sometimes it was simple asks, but it was change.
Right.
And I remember even some of the things we asked classroom teachers to do, and I was thinking, I would not have liked to have made some of those changes when I was in the classroom, but it worked out well. So this is a great honor. And Scott, did you want to?
Yeah, I'm working for an electric company, an electric cooperative, Associate Electric Co-op. I wanted to say thank you and kudos to you and to Richard and David for what you do. You're saving the taxpayers money and you're lowering emissions to their environment. So it's a total win-win all the way around. Thank you. I really appreciate all your work.
Anyone? Anything else?
Well, other than updating our thermometers, any other quick advices? What can we do in our homes?
In your homes, I mean,
I'm just curious,
you know,
32%. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's utilizing and ensuring that when you're not there, that those things are not running. That's the big thing. Like, we're not here to make anybody uncomfortable. We're here to ensure that when people are not in those buildings, that they're set back and they're doing what they're supposed to do. And so that's what this team does.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Do we need it? Okay.
I get it from Bailey all the time, the lecture. He's even got the thermometers hooked up because now it's all. But I was wondering if there are any other tips I can take. Like, he has them all updated. He did it for his whole office. Like, when we're not here, why is it air conditioned?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I mean,
You get the Nest or whatever. You
But
get
it really,
everything in your
but it
phone.
really upsets me when I'm home and he thinks I'm not home and he turns them off. All the light switches are connected. Literally, I'll be doing laundry in the basement at 2 a.m. and like he'll get up to do something and he'll check to see if the kids left lights on and he'll shut it on.
Turn off the power to your computer.
Well, no, but I mean,
Right.
of course, the first time it happened, I thought there was, I live in an old house or whatever.
That's funny.
So that is still the mainstay of reducing emissions, is to just make sure you cut back when you're not there.
City utilities will do that for you.
Oh, sure. No worries.
Okay, that was fun.
Oh, does she work with that company?
Daily Citizen.
Huh?
She's with the Daily Citizen.
Oh, okay.
Okay, moving on to our approval. 1.04, approval of agenda. So the recommended action is that the board approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Danielle. Seconded motion, and Sharita second. So at this time, we'll please vote.
Not yet.
You need to click on approval of agenda. I have no clue.
Can we do a
Yeah, just count and keep going.
verbal? Steve?
I approve.
And I, Steve? So we'll move on. Okay, carried. So we're moving on to our 2.01, public comments. A little something I need to read before we move forward. The Board of Education welcomes comments about issues being discussed. The board uses this time in our meeting to listen to the public, but we will not comment or engage with the public during this meeting. The board allows for up to 10 speakers per public comment period. The board chair will call on individuals in the order in which they signed up. Substitutions are not permitted. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes and will be timed by the board secretary. I would also like to remind you that if you're speaking, that on both of the screens there will be a timer that will help you to track your time. Comments must be acceptable for a business and family-friendly environment. It has also been brought to my attention we have students that watch our meetings, so keep that in mind. Inappropriate language, gestures, or personal attacks will not be tolerated. It is inappropriate to address the board about individual students or individual staff members by name in open meeting. If you have concerns about individuals, these concerns should be addressed through the appropriate administrative supervisors, either in the schools or in the district office. If you have materials that you want to share, please place them in the tray on the podium, and they will be distributed to board members following the meeting. So at this time, I'm going to ask our first speaker to come forward, and that would be Kyler Sherman Wilkins.
Good evening and happy Pride Month. Just a reminder, there's a request to put out a statement of support for our trans youth. I figured this month is just as good a time as any. I'm here tonight to express a few concerns that myself and some other members of the community, including some who are gathered here today, have about rumors about a concerted effort to undermine and dismantle the Office of Equity and Inclusion here at SPS. Now, part of me, the naive part, thinks these are just rumors, right? It surely is not the case that individuals would choose to try to dismantle an important office in light of very traumatic events, including the shooting in Buffalo, in which a white supremacist killed 10 black folks in Buffalo. A swastika being painted on the side of a church here in Springfield, a historically black church, and of course, culturally insensitive and offensive graffiti found in Kickapoo Public Schools. And yet, after I reflect on some of the campaign rhetoric and some of the comments made by board members, it's not surprising at all. It actually is a valid concern that there are individuals who seek to attack this office. And look, I get it, right? We're coming up for a budget vote. I know that you need to look over offices and ensure that programs are worth the money spent. And so in light of that, I wanted to highlight a few wins that I think are important to note that come from this particular office. First, The office has worked with sites to facilitate having difficult conversations with families, particularly families from disadvantaged groups. They've advocated and ensured that families feel affirmed, supported, and safe. They also played an important and vital role in development of SPS University, which I think we can all agree is a hugely successful program. They launched the Future Educated Grow Your Own program to address future teacher shortages, which I know that we are all concerned with. They added sexual orientation and gender identity to anti-harassment policies, which, as these groups typically are disproportionately impacted by bullying and harassment, it's a really important step to ensure that they are protected. And lastly, they advocated on the part of Native American students who wanted to don a feather on their cap during their regalia. Before the trainings were canceled due to a misguided lawsuit, it's important to note that these trainings were highly effective. 62% of individuals who responded to a survey felt comfortable during these trainings. 59% felt satisfied by these trainings, and 71% said that the content was important and necessary for their work here at SPS. So I think that we should not be entertaining any thoughts to undermine this important office. And I encourage everyone to look at the actual data and understand that these tangible results are also combined with intangible results, namely that students feel supported when they have offices like equity and inclusion that are advocating on their behalf. Thank you.
Our next speaker, and please excuse me if I mispronounce your name, but I think it's Kawanda. Is that correct? Thank you. Kaiwanda.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Kaiwanda Sutton. I am the current president of the NAACP chapter here in Springfield. I would like to start by saying the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion serves a great purpose in our community. This educational department is respected, relevant, and needed. One of the educational issues our community faces is educational gaps. We know that academic success is tied to students feeling represented and supported in schools. In order to help students gain access to higher education. As the NAACP, we've partnered with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Missouri State for the popular Youth Empowerment Conference. During this conference, students learn about ethical leadership, cultural competence, and community engagement. There is also a special senior level academy. These discussions are facilitated by Missouri State University staff and students as well as community members. As a parent of children in the SPS district, I personally have found great value in what the office brings and how intentional they are with making sure all students are safe, included, and represented. I know this from personal experience. We've encountered racism in our previous school district. In the incident, leadership told us our students may not be open to being so diverse, and we don't know how to address these issues. We've moved to Springfield seeking a better future for my children. A student at SPS schools told my daughter, who struggled with learning disabilities but was an excellent athlete, she was told by her peers that she wasn't smart enough to read but was fast enough to run because of her culture and its history of having to run. She was teased because of her learning disabilities and boxed in because of her race. It was then I encountered concerned staff who wanted to help but didn't know how. I have seen what a difference the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion has made in our community. The DEI office has partnered with NAACP Springfield when we have had incidents. For example, after some students spray painted the N-word on the wall of a local high school, we were able to go in and mediate with the principal and staff and find solutions for the affected students and staff and help them cope with the trauma of the events. I can't stress enough that the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion serves a great purpose in our community. This educational department is, again, respected, relevant, and needed. Keep in mind, remembering that in this present moment, right now, on St. Louis Street, is the Trail of Tears. Learning our history is how we fix our present and our future. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Cheryl Clay.
Good evening. First, I want to thank SPS for addressing the Boyd School playground access. The children are able to play on the playground after hours now. Second, it seems to be a lot of confusion about the need of the diversity, equity, and inclusion in our community. Let me clarify some of these functions. The office assists with the continued education of SPS staff and the protection of equity and inclusion issues for students. One quick example, just 3 or 4 years ago, SPS Middle School was still conducting a Civil War reenactment, complete with African American students as slaves, the Confederate flag, and mock guns. A huge disrespect and uncomfortable situation that students were subjected to due to cultural ignorance or uncaring. The huge blooper was not only the flag, but African American parents don't typically let their children play with toy guns for the obvious social norm. After many meetings, the DE&I office resolved that situation for the most part. Education is an ongoing life experience. As social norms change, so do shifts in the culture of ethnic groups. What used to be tolerated or overlooked is no longer acceptable in today's society. Also, discounting and overlooking contributions of different ethnic groups to this country are no longer acceptable. Our next generations deserve to know that folks before them look like them and have done great things. So can they. I have attended these school board meetings for years. Not just the last month, not just the last 2 months, but for probably the last 10 years. So this process is nothing new for me. So let me be clear. I understand that the power of words can be used for good and used for bad. I am proud to be a social justice warrior and activist for all SPS students.
Next speaker, Danelle Pantio. Did I get that right, Danelle? Pantleo, sorry.
That's okay, so close.
I see there's an L now, not an I.
Thank you.
Apologize.
I'm going to get a little personal today. My name is Danelle Pantleo. I'm a special education paraprofessional, future teacher, and parent of 2 SPS graduates. An unfortunate part of my story is that when my kids were still a part of this district, you would not have seen me here advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion in our schools. I was a different person with a smaller worldview and ignorant of the impact that I could have had. I had not yet experienced my own child coming out as non-binary transgender. I had not yet been educated in diversity and the importance of inclusion and representation, nor had I yet begun listening to people who have had very different life experiences from mine. The catalyst for me, what made me intentionally take a step back and become a more empathetic and caring individual, was twofold. It was a diversity, equity, and inclusion training that I was privileged enough to be a part of, and it was just a few people in my social circle who took the time and made the effort to share another perspective with me and with others around me. Seeing those other perspectives and having those sometimes uncomfortable conversations changed the entire trajectory of my life. Without those voices, those life lessons, I would not be studying now to earn my special education degree in hopes of teaching for Springfield Public Schools. My child would not have felt safe being themselves around me, and I would not have this desire to stand up for the educational rights of all the students in our district. I'm here today to emphasize the need we have to conduct diversity and inclusion trainings for faculty and staff, and to teach our students about diversity in our classrooms while we prioritize social emotional learning. The news that some members of this board may be open to the dissolution of the district's Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is problematic and worrisome, to say the very least. I implore you, do not let the mindless political rhetoric of our country deter you from providing our staff and students with this essential part of learning. We are at a pivotal point in the life of public education. Now is not the time to cease our efforts to create a safe and inclusive environment for our students. Now is the time to bolster those efforts and do more for marginalized and underserved communities. Remember whom you have been elected to serve. This is not only students and families of different races, identities, and socioeconomic backgrounds, but also students with disabilities and special education needs. All of that and more is in the definition of diversity. And every one of our students' futures depend on you being on the right side of history right now. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Joan Gentry.
Good evening, everyone. I stood here in June of 2021 to speak to this board in support of our school district's Focus Area 5, Equity and Diversity. I'm here again to ask for your continued support of this area. I'm a retired Springfield teacher. Our son graduated from Parkview. We have a granddaughter who attends Central and a grandson who graduated from Central. And by the way, ended up on the Dean's Honor Roll first at MU this year, so we're very proud of him. I'm not here, though, as a former teacher, parent, or grandparent, but rather as a member of the League of Women Voters of Southwest Missouri. The League is a nonpartisan political organization fully committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in principle and in practice. Our commitment to DEI is central to our current and future success in engaging individuals, households, communities, and policymakers in creating a more perfect democracy. Our areas of emphasis include voter registration, voter education, and voter advocacy. As our League's Voter Services Chair, I recently served on a Network for Progress panel discussion of the Community Focus 2021 area, society, social and community context. My part of the discussion revolved around a blue ribbon, improved voter outreach and education efforts, and a red ribbon, low voter turnout, difficulty in identifying active voters, and how misinformation affects citizen participation. Our group discussion centered on how to improve red ribbon areas. Here is my point. Low voter registration and low voter area turnout areas are more commonly located in underrepresented communities. Local League members provide voter registration opportunities at community events like Juneteenth, schools and colleges, libraries, farmers markets, independent living centers, and at naturalization ceremonies. We work with the NAACP, the Kitchen, Community Partnerships of the Ozark, Harmony House, the Drew Lewis Foundation, and Rare Breed, and other organizations to provide voter registration and education to eligible voters who are part of underrepresented communities. We are a supporter of MSU's Pause to the Polls voter initiative. But as we talk with underrepresented community members, we find that there is mistrust in the system and that a sense that no one listens or that their vote doesn't count. We believe that engagement and advocacy for our students and other folks who are a part of our underrepresented communities will lead to increased community engagement, and that increased community engagement will lead to an actively engaged voting citizenry. We urge you to give your continued support to Focus Area 5, Diversity and Equity. And thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Brandy Van Antwerp.
Hi, thank you for your time. I'm Brandy Van Antwerp. I'm the mom of 3 SPS kids, including 1 foster son. I'm also the executive director at Foster Adopt Connect here in Springfield. We're a resource agency that supports basically resources, I'm going to be redundant, to at-risk kids or those who are already in foster and adoptive care and the families that care for them. I want to thank the Office of Equity and Diversity for their work and ask that our board continues to support their efforts. They serve students who have free and reduced lunch, which makes up about 47% of our student population, our students of color, which means about 28% of our population, students with disabilities, about 12%, English language learners, approximately 4.8%, McKinney-Vento students, who are those who are unstably housed, those who are homeless, and those who are in the foster care system, which I work with daily, which makes up about 4.97%. And LGBTQ plus students who are not captured by our SPS analytics, but they are 120% more likely to be homeless than our non-LGBTQ plus youth, and they are more likely to have suicidal ideation without supports needed for them. I have heard some folks who would love to see our mission statement revert back to academic excellence for all students. We cannot help all students have academic excellence if we cannot first help them meet their most basic needs. As Maslow's hierarchy of needs states, we all must have psychological needs such as food, shelter, sleep, and clothing, safety needs like personal security, resources, and health, love and belonging such as friendship, family, and sense of connection, esteem, respect, self-esteem, and strength, before we can reach self-actualization, which is where we have the desire to become the most that we can be, which this is the level when learning is at its greatest. I would ask that our school board support our large number of students who benefit from the services due to the Office of Equity and Diversity by continuing support of that office, and also want to point out that our ESSER funds, which were quite tremendous in the millions of dollars, do require that we provide equitable opportunity for our students and services for our homeless youth. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Cynthia Collins.
Good afternoon. I want to thank you for allowing the community the time to share our thoughts and our concerns. My concern lies with the thoughts that the board would entertain dismantling diversity, equity, inclusion department. The city of Springfield and the community at large has worked tirelessly for decades to be able to proudly serve and give liberty and justice for all. Springfield Public School just graduated almost 100 racially diverse students that will go out and be put into and make their impact into not just in Springfield, but anywhere they go. The administration of Springfield Public School has experienced severe, highly charged situations over the past several years. The department has handled them with kindness and professionalism, due to the major fact that they have a diversity, inclusion, equity inclusion department. It is rooted in the community with the students' welfare in mind. The administration has a strong department in place for the community. Dismantling department would be a dishonor to all the Springfieldians that want it to become a welcoming community. I, at this time, ask you to really consider what it would be for each individual in our Springfield area if your diversity, equity, and inclusion department was dismantled. You trust that department. You have seen what they have done. Families have seen what they have done. We are coming up on Black History Summer Academy. This is an event that is very, very popular in the community at large, where deep-rooted relationships are made with children from all backgrounds, with families from all backgrounds, that they can proudly say that they are part of the Springfield community. So as closing, I wish that you would consider just what it would mean for our community if you dismantled that department. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Kiki Rover.
All right. Hello, I am Kiki Rover. I am a proud parent of an SPS student, but I am also System Director of System Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Borough Behavioral Health. With the recognition of Pride Month and for all of our LGBTQIA plus students, I would like to lead with these 3 statistics, and I'm going to share the following statistics from the Trevor Project, which is one of the leading research-based advocacy organizations for LGBTQIA plus youth. So the first one is lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide. Nearly half of young trans people have seriously thought about suicide. Each episode of LGBTQ or LGBT victimization, and whether that be physical harassment or abuse or verbal harassment or abuse, increases the likelihood of self-harming behavior by 2.5 times on average. I think that we can all agree that we have brains, right? Our brains are foremost survival brains. This means we survive and thrive best when we are in relationship with or are connected with others. Our brains naturally have a need to feel a sense of safety, significance, relation, and respect. This is even more important for the developing brains of our children and our youth. If we want historically marginalized students to show up and be their best self, this means we have to provide space where they can disarm their trauma brain. The best way to help them disarm their trauma brain is to create an atmosphere of inclusion. Inclusion is an act, and it takes time and energy. It takes action to practice inclusion. The American Psychological Association states that many children and youth continue to experience poor mental health outcomes based on their socioeconomic disadvantage, ethnic or racial minority status, or immigrant status. And I'm also going to say gender identity and sexual orientation as well. As a result, many of these children fail to adequately meet developmental tasks, demands, and transitions such as entry into and successful achievement in school, interpersonal and peer relationship, and civic functioning. This also applies to those carrying a historically marginalized identity who exist in spaces who refuse to acknowledge their identity, which literally prevents students from thriving and stunts their academic achievements. And if we are not practicing inclusion, that means that we are practicing exclusion. Scientifically, when someone is experiencing exclusion, they have reduced intelligent thought and reasoning, increased self-defeating behavior, and a whole laundry list of a lot of different things. But ultimately, they can't show up at their best as their best self. So what I'm asking is that we continue to support and empower the efforts by the DEI department, because if we really want students to show up holistically, they need a safe space where they can exist. Thank you.
Next speaker, Toy Allen. Is that correct? T-O-I, Toy Allen.
No, it was Toy.
Toy
Toy's not here.
first, and then, no. It's a T-O-I-A-L-L-E-N. Toy is not here. Okay.
They're not related. No.
Okay, so next we'll move, and if Toy shows up, we'll pick that up. So Jasmine Allen. You're next. So we have you on here, but we just had an Allen before you.
Okay. Thank you guys for your service. I appreciate it. I'm going to talk to you guys about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So one of our former Girl Scouts shared at the Art of Being Me. I'm going to share part of her story. Sometimes people will talk about my race, and I don't think it's okay. It should have stopped a long time ago, but it happens to other people too. I feel like only being 11 and dealing with racism is strange, and it's not right. I can forgive them most of the time, but it makes me angry. I struggle with being rude and not being able to control what I'm saying. When I say something, I instantly regret it. makes me feel better when I apologize. I want people to understand that when I say something that might be offensive, I don't want to think that that's what I really mean. I'm a loving person, and when I feel loved, I feel like I'm at home. So I'm going to ask you, how are we going to get back to our diversity, equity, and inclusion? I would suggest that from participating in the MEA training, that was 6 weeks long over the course of the year, and then I also did the training at Missouri State, which was 12 weeks long. I feel like if we do the one and done, check a box, that's not really changing people's hearts and minds, right? You know, I feel like if we, break a meal and really get into those conversations like one of our previous speakers had shared, that can change some hearts and minds. Another reason why it's important is it improves our practices. My daughter has shared with me numerous times how when a person of color does the same thing, such as have their phone, talk, whatever the behavior may be, how it's handled varies greatly. I too have witnessed, I'm also a teacher for SPS and a former student, so I can attest to that as well. And also, I have personally experienced microaggressions and discriminatory practices from my beginnings of a student here. Has it gotten better? Yeah, when I call people in, but should it just be me doing the work? I don't know. I don't think so. And then I'd ask us, what has changed over the years? I'm sure looking at our data, the school to prison pathway, our grading systems, the access to IB and AP, has that changed? Has that improved? And so I know it's going to take more than just certain people to dismantle systemic racism and the oppression of LGBTQ. So I ask you guys to continue the work, and I'm also going to follow up on the ESSER funds for neurodivergent students with the music therapy and language as well. I know when I was a Spanish teacher, it was at all middle schools. Currently, it's only at 4. I know we can do better. Remember, diversity, equity, and inclusion. You guys have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes our public comments. Thank you, each one of you, for your comments, and I appreciate everyone watching carefully their time. Makes it go much more pleasant. Okay, we're moving on to 3 consent agenda information reports. So this evening, this is our study session. This is the board's opportunity to hear from the staff regarding our consent agenda information reports. So we're going to start with 3.01, end of year, and ESY summer transportation route approval. And so Dr. Mulford, will you please come up and
All right, good evening, board. It's good to see you. So for those of you that may have forgotten, or if you're new, state statute requires that school boards approve the annual routes in September, and then come back and in June, if there's any substantial changes, approve the final routes for the year. So that's what this is coming to you on the consent agenda for next meeting, is just that final approval of routes. We do have Mr. Jonathan Sheldon here in case you have any questions I can't answer, but this really is just a formality at this point. It's just finalizing our routes from the past school year. Also in there is the extended school year routes for summer school. So any questions on that?
So let's stop a minute and everyone kind of think through. If you have any questions, of course, we know we have 2 weeks to forward questions to you, but this is a great time if anyone wants to initiate a question that might start a public, or that might start a discussion, that we all can join in.
This one's it is pretty straightforward, but one of the things you'll notice on there, you may notice some routes have small amount of kids, and one thing you might notice is that it may say sped out to the side or something like that, but then also early childhood buses, they're going to be smaller. So usually when you see a small number, it's one of two things. It's either a small bus or the distance they have to travel is greater, so they can't pick up as many kids because they have to cover a lot of distance in a short period of time. So do want to say thank you to Mr. Sheldon for his continued. Where are you at, Jonathan? Okay, stand up. I want everybody to see your face so they know the man behind the work. But Jonathan and his team do a great job. They're already starting to get to work on next year's finalized routes. We're going to put all the pieces where they need to put them to be as efficient as we can be. And so I just want to publicly thank Jonathan and his team for the work that they do.
Okay, so no questions at this time. We will move on then to consent agenda preliminary contracts, agreements, and change orders, 4.01. Are you staying with us?
Same with you.
Okay.
All right, so we did receive some questions. I think we've sent a couple of responses already. If you have any other questions, we'll be happy to get them answered. Tammy did send out this afternoon a few late additions. They're all pretty standard, but make sure that you pay attention to that. I think in the email she sent, she calls out what was added in the body of the email so you can easily see what it is. A couple of those items I do want to point out is MedPay and Leaf are there who consult with us for pharmacy. And so Gordon Kinney, Marshall Kinney, some of you may know them. Anyhow, they've been working with Elixir, who does our pharmacy for us, to negotiate better rates and guaranteed rebates for us. And so that's what that amendment is through those negotiations. They're actually have, Elixir's going to make it retroactive to January 1, those improved rates. So we're very excited about that. And then you'll also see a letter of intent from Elixir as well. And basically they're committing to coming to the table over the next few months and trying to negotiate even better rates for 2023. So that's kind of what that is. No cost to it, it's just improving our current contract. So, yes, sir.
John, quick question on, is MedPay one of those that we were reviewing and to consider renewing their contract? Is that right for this year?
So MedPay manages the claims for the Health Benefit Trust. So that is part of our overall insurance renewal. So depending on how that ends up, because that's still in process, MedPay could be selected to continue to administer those claims. Some entities are kind of all-encompassing, and so they do not only the insurance but the administration of claims as well. So we'll be bringing that back to the board either August or September with a recommendation on how to proceed with the health insurance piece of things. Yes, sir.
So looking at any of the attachments or any of the expenditures, any other questions that you want to bring forward at this time to ask John? And you still have the 2-week period time to ask specific questions, but anything that is something you want to ask now?
I have a comment. I don't know if it's so much a question.
Okay.
But within the KCOB, specifically, there's a contract for legal services agreement.
Sure. Which one, so we can all go to that one? Is it?
Ellis, Hammonds, and Johnson.
I know, but which category?
That's going to be the contracts 15 to 499.
Okay.
That'll be the 5th item down.
I'd just like to suggest that we, before we vote to approve this, that we as a board have a discussion, which may need to happen in executive session since it's legal/personnel. Just my suggestion that I would like to have just as all of us discussion before we approve that contract.
So, John?
So I guess I might be suggesting if we are not able to have that discussion prior to next week, then we might look at removing that from the KCOB.
Okay, so John, provide us guidance, or Grenada, provide us guidance on that, because it needs to be a public discussion, as far as I understand.
Yeah, so just for a point of clarification, so it is an engagement letter and not a contract.
Okay.
And so the difference there, it's kind of like when we select architects, right? So we go through the RFI process, we select architects, and we essentially have a list, and we can choose the architect that best meets the need for the project, right? So it's kind of the same thing with legal. So it's an engagement letter that basically just specifies what that firm's fees are, should we choose to use Ellis & Ellis to represent us in a particular case.
So the $300,000 number is an estimate, everything is billed hourly?
That's correct.
Is that right?
That's
We're not
correct.
committing to $300,000, we're just saying
Yeah, so this,
not to exceed, is that?
that's exactly right. And should it exceed, we come back to the board, with adjusted amount.
So does that mean, I'm sorry, but let him finish and then we'll come back.
That's helpful. I would still like to suggest that we discuss
So you,
that.
how do you want to do that? Because we need to do it publicly.
I don't know that we
closed
do,
session,
if it's a
right?
matter of personnel and legal issues, do we?
It's not a personnel.
I mean, if we're talking about legal issues, like particular items that we have ongoing litigation, that can be discussed in closed session. If you're talking about engagement of services, then that would be a public discussion.
Yeah, see, I don't know, I think it could ride the edge of both, and I don't want to be out of line talking about something that we couldn't.
Can I
I don't know where to go with it.
Can I ask a question? Sure. So what is the rationale for your request?
Then you go next.
To discuss legal and personnel issues as it relates to this contract or this engagement, this relationship with this firm.
Can you clarify that?
No, because I think it needs to be an executive session to do so. That's where I'm stuck. I don't think I can say it.
Can we look into that? Because I absolutely get what you're saying, that the exception, right, in the rule for public discussion is to discuss legal situations that might affect the school district versus here it's a contract to hire somebody to represent us.
Right,
or
so
to continue to represent us.
on the 21st, we have a legal update scheduled for closed session. Should the board desire, and Dr. Latham report, we could look at having closed session before the open board meeting to review that legal update, and then maybe that will get.
But just like hiring of an architect would not be closed session, hiring of an attorney would not be closed session either.
That's correct.
So unless your concerns are related to one of our legal cases, I think what I'm suggesting is that your rationale is about who we should have a contract with, which is for open session.
See, that's where, so my position is to have a discussion on the matter which crosses over a lot of different areas. Some may cross into executive session and some may not. So I don't know how to say further without.
Well, let us do some research on that,
Okay.
and then we can.
But yeah, my intent was to offer this as a suggestion. Obviously, if the majority of us don't agree to do that, then we don't have to do that. I'm just offering this as a suggestion because I think it would be good for the 7 of us to have a discussion about, I guess, the nature of the relationship with our council, who they represent.
I think those are open session kinds of discussions is what I'm saying, so.
Maybe, so I will follow up with questions and find out if that's true, and then we'll decide where to go from there, I guess. And then I'm happy to have those discussions in public if we determine that I'm not misstepping. I'm more than happy to have those discussions. I just don't want to
one
misstep.
clarification. The attorneys represent the school district. They do not represent any of us individually. They're here to serve in the best interest of the school district, not individual board members nor the superintendent or superintendent staff.
Okay.
So we'll do some research on that.
So Kelly, when you say you'll have some questions, you'll have questions of Granita and John. Okay, and so Steve, did you have something you
I'm
wanted to
just
say?
going to remark that it's not necessarily contingent on a personnel matter or anything of this nature that might be in closed session. It's just a matter of continuing on with the current legal contract.
Right.
Is that about right?
And so if that's the discussion, then that's an open session discussion.
Yes.
If it crosses over into litigation that is existing, then that would be a closed session.
But entering into an engagement with this particular firm does not prevent the board from entering into any additional engagement with other law firms.
That's good, thank you for clarifying that.
Scott, you had.
Just to add on your, the personnel you're talking about. When we talk about personnel in closed session, we're talking about SPS personnel. We're not talking about personnel outside or a contractor that we hire.
Very good. Very good.
Would that be proper, if it's a contracted personnel, would that be proper in a board meeting to call them by name?
Not if there's litigation. I mean, any kind of litigation. Is that what you're asking?
I'm saying if we're contracting services from someone, and there are specific people we're contracting services from, would it be proper to name them if we're talking about things in open, since they're contractors and not employees?
Right, but they're not employees of Springfield Public Schools. They're like any other business that we can, any other entity that we conduct business with. If they're not providing the service that the board feels that they're providing, then there's an open discussion as to why we would not continue with that contract, and that should be a public discussion.
Okay.
But to make sure I'm understanding your question, you're saying if there's an issue with the services being provided by a particular entity, is it more appropriate to talk about the entity versus calling out a specific person that works for that entity? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Would it be improper to say someone's name that is working through that entity?
Under that company's umbrella?
Would you say you would have to?
Remember, we're employing a particular company that has various employees.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Miriam, you had wanted to ask something
Well, I
earlier,
had
but-
one thing to ask,
Okay.
but then all this happened, so now I have three things.
And then we
Only
need to
three?
move on.
Only three. So
Not hearing a
I'm gonna-
majority of the board that wants to do
So I'm going to
this outside
first go
of
back to the
open.
question I had, but then I do want to touch on some of the follow-up questions. So you said it's a service agreement. I want to understand that. Does that mean, is that like when you go to rent, a month-to-month rent, or is that a lease for the year? So for example, like Dr. Lathan said, at any point, if we choose, we can hire the services of another firm. But are we obligated to use this firm for the whole year, or is this just a contract fee that we're approving?
So it's an engagement letter. Basically just says, if we use their services, here's what they will provide and what their fees are.
Or we could choose not to use their services.
Correct.
So it's like a month-to-month agreement.
Really, it is, so an example.
Hour-to-hour
agreement
Hour-to-hour
is what it
agreement.
is.
Minute to minute, quite frankly.
And remember, we use a different firm for collective bargaining. We already do that. This is
Well,
just a
this isn't-
formality for the board to have
I
to approve it.
yeah, but it's nice to have clarification, so this isn't, we're going to use this firm and only this firm. So that answers that. So it's a service agreement rather than a contract to address that. So that's very helpful. And then to follow up on what Kelly was saying in terms of open versus closed discussions, I'm sitting here thinking about this. I think the fundamental question, correct me if I'm wrong, that you want us to look at is, from a personnel perspective, are we happy with the services that we're receiving? That's really, I think, am I correct?
I wanted to give everyone a chance to have a discussion. It's not about what I want.
So if-
I'm happy to
so
say
my-
there's two questions I would have,
So,
but I just wanted everyone to have the discussion, and I'm not sure what the proper format is for that.
so yes, the proper format would be in public session, but I'm concerned about that because the services that are being provided to the board, now the services provided to the board are different than those provided to the district. The ones that are provided to the board.
No, they provided service to the district, not to
So
the
that's
board.
point 3, actually. Yes, thank you. But I'll get to that because that's, the attorney represents the school district. So I guess the question is, do we need to hire an attorney to represent the board? Because the board is engaged in lawsuits currently. So and in order to have a conversation about that, are we happy with our representation in these lawsuits, then we have to enter into conversations that have to do with previous litigation or current litigation. And therefore, I feel that it would be proper to not have it in public, because I'm not comfortable talking about, if someone asks me, how do you feel about the services that are provided to you? Well, the services that are provided to me, separate from the district, that I'm privy to. I'm not privy to the services, like the things they do with the 504s. I don't know about those, but the ones that have come before me that I have to evaluate are those that have to do with litigation. And therefore, I'm not comfortable discussing those in public because there's specific concerns if I have. I don't want to talk. I don't think it would be proper. Point 3, so
the attorney represents the school district. I thought this firm represents the school district and the board in litigation. Am I incorrect?
They are generally synonymous, okay, that the board as a whole is the district essentially. Okay, now when you start talking about individual board members, then they would represent individual board members in their official capacity.
Correct.
But not outside of that.
Because the board members are named in litigation in their capacity.
Right.
And the superintendent.
And superintendent,
Yes,
right.
but the superintendent is an employee of the district, so that's different, whereas the board members are serving in a public role, non-employed, volunteer service. I'm confused. Do we need to have a discussion as to whether we need an attorney to represent the board's interests?
You have an attorney who's representing the board's interests, and it's the same attorney who's representing the district's interests because they're one and the same.
So it's not,
If there ever came a
if
situation,
they're one and the same, then why is the board listed and then the superintendent is listed?
so again, it's all about official capacity, right? So if there
Right.
ever came a situation, God forbid, where the board and the superintendent were on different sides of an issue, the attorney would represent the board. The superintendent would have to get their own
Oh, they
attorney
would?
at that point in time.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Okay, but generally, that's not how it works. Generally, it's all under the same umbrella, right? And so I've known superintendents where they got in that situation and they did not use that attorney that represented the district because they represented the district. And they had to go get a different attorney. So it's the school board as a whole and the district are essentially synonymous.
So there are instances where board members are individually sued in their capacity as functioning as a board member. Not their personhood, but their personhood is sued in that capacity. So I guess what I'm hearing is if that were to ever happen, we would then look at that?
So in those situations, we would have conversation with the attorney representing the district, and they would advise whether individual representation was needed or not.
Okay, so we're back to square one. What are we going to do with this conversation that, in my, I don't know, please weigh in. I think that if I want to have the conversation, it's impossible for me to have it in public because it would have to do with litigation.
So again, if it's going to go back to a specific litigation that is existing, so I think we're talking two things. We're talking this engagement letter, which is general, and whether or not we want to approve it. That's open, all right?
Thank you.
What you referenced was concern about or questions about how we're being represented in a specific scenario. Since it's a specific scenario, that will qualify under closed, right? So I think there's two different.
Yep. And since this is not a contract, it is a service agreement, there's no reason to pull it out of KCOP. Because
That's correct.
if we're at some point, 3 months down the road, 4 months down the road, not happy with the services, we could just switch.
It doesn't commit us to anything. That's
Does that help?
It helps to the extent that I've got a little bit of the questions answered, but I still think there's a larger discussion to be had. I'll piggybacking off of what you said, I have questions also for the rare occasions that the interests of the board are different than the interests of our one employee, the superintendent. I agree that most of the time, far most of the time, that we are a team, we're working together. But there are times where our interests are different than the superintendent.
My interest is to protect the district also, so I just want to make sure that that's clear for the public that's listening. We are supposed to be on the same page. My interests are always going to be protect the children and the staff that I've been asked to serve. So we should not be on the same page, and I'm going to follow the law as required of what we should and should not do. But I had to say that.
I mean, we are on the same page.
I got the chair. I got it today.
I don't want this to be misinterpreted.
Yeah, what might
It
be
is.
helpful,
Can I
if you could
finish?
give
It
a
was.
scenario.
Can I finish?
Can you give a scenario?
Yes, this
That'll
should
help.
not be misinterpreted that there's anything that I think you're doing wrong or anything like that. So I'll just give here's an example.
A scenario.
So when Steve and I are new board members, we come on to the board, one of the first things we do is go through an onboarding with legal. And we're receiving several hours of advice about how to handle something, how to handle basically sunshine law, right? Well, if our role as board members is to oversee at 1/7, all 7 of us to oversee one employee, it's fantastic. Let me reiterate that. Then, as we're being told how to navigate sunshine law and state statute and all of that, there are certain things that we need to understand from that council that allow us to do our job in oversight of the district that may conflict with the advice that superintendent might get for oversight of the district. So there are times where I feel like it would be in our best interest to have counsel that the board can talk to, knowing that their only interest is us. And how would we go about doing that?
So I don't know what Dr. Lathan has experienced what I've experienced in the districts I've been in, is that those types of things were funneled through the board president, who then would determine if they needed to reach out to the attorney for a one-on-one conversation to get clarity on a particular issue.
So that it seems like though, like things like the sunshine law in your example, the sunshine law is what it is, and so there's not like a better perspective from a different lawyer. It's just the sunshine law, and I'm not interpreting my own way.
A lot of law is based on interpretation of the law.
And I just want to caveat this with, I am an attorney. I am not the attorney for the district. I'm not the attorney for the board or any individual board member, but I don't just lose my experience when I walk through that door. If the attorney for the district and the board, who's the same person because our interests are aligned, have advised you to do one thing with sunshine law, that same attorney is going to advise everybody to do the same thing with the sunshine law. The advice shouldn't be different because the interpretation is going to be the same from that attorney. If you disagree with that attorney, you can step out of your role as board member and go get your own individual attorney to advise you on a personal matter. But the attorney for the district is the attorney for the district.
Also get guidance from MSBA regarding those same issues.
Right. But what you're describing, where there's a difference between what the superintendent may or may not do and what a board member may or may not do, the advice should be the same. At that point, you're talking about somebody going rogue and violating sunshine law, which then they'd be stepping outside of their duties as a superintendent or duties as a board member.
I believe that there can be different interpretations of law, and that's why we have attorneys to decipher all that. You can ask one attorney one thing, they're going to be one opinion. You can ask another one another, they're going to give you a different opinion.
I suppose if you come across a situation like that, we can talk to our attorney for the school and see what he says.
So I think where we're at is, let's do some research, find out what is allowable under the sunshine law as it relates to the selected legal services, and then we can follow up. I think it all goes back to, if it's a question about how we're being represented in a specific litigation scenario, that certainly would be closed session.
And that's coming up June 21st.
June 21st.
So, but for now, it is helpful to know that this is a service agreement.
Right.
Because some of the other items on the KCOP are not service agreements.
That's right.
So it's easy to see how one would think that you're committed for 300 or whatever the number is. That's good to know that, so that the conversation is we're always up for it and open. Am I interpreting the situation? And I'm not trying to cut you off, but there are a couple of KCOP questions I have.
Okay, let's move on.
What do you think? Is that answer? Okay.
Yeah, I think we're where we are. So you have more KCOB? Let's go.
Well, I had time to.
And I didn't mean to bypass anyone, but I'll come back around because everyone should have an opportunity to.
You can.
Steve, do you have any KCOP questions?
I do not.
Thank you. Scott?
I do not.
You do not? Okay. Sharita? And keeping in mind, we have 2 weeks to come back. We've already asked you a plethora of questions, I think, today. So, Miriam? You have?
Yes, and I've asked many questions, and I appreciate the answers. And I will re-engage because I don't understand some of the answers, and I need more clarification. It's easier to sometimes things said than written, but I was wondering if we could get, so that all the board members can hear about it, because I had asked questions about EduClimber last year, this time, and I've asked again. So can I get more clarification, because I'm not understanding the paragraph.
I know we have some people here that understand EduClimber way better than
That
me.
would be great.
And so Dr. Holt, I'm going to kind of step aside and let Dr. Holt and some of her team kind of address
Just
that.
want a clarification, the response that was sent to the board members, and Board Member McCoskey, you sent the question yesterday. We did send a response. So you're saying you need additional information from the response that was sent to the board?
Yeah, I want to have engage over the response. I don't understand it. Yeah, I did. Because I had asked last year, because I knew that this was being piloted, and I want more information on how the piloting worked and what capacity, how it works with various softwares, and...
Last June? Is this last June?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Before, I'm sorry, yes,
Okay.
before.
Okay.
So I should have probably forwarded that communication, I'm sorry.
So, Dr. Crystal Majors, I don't think that she's been to the podium yet to meet the new board. She's the new Executive Director of Academics. So we partner almost daily at this point on various things. So she's onboarding, and we provided a little bit of a response around EduClimber, but I'll allow her to speak specifically to the pilot, and then I can address its usage in this calendar year.
Yeah, so I wasn't in this position last year, so I don't have specific details about the pilot. It began last spring, and they piloted it in certain buildings, and then there was a committee. They reviewed data, pilot teachers shared how it worked, and then they made a decision on which system to go with.
Were there other systems piloted? I was in an understanding that we had a contract with EduClimber. But we did.
Well, it's up for renewal right now.
Right, so it was, we paid for the services. Were there other things that we piloted, or just EduClimber?
Do you need specificity of additional pilots?
I don't know the specificity.
Okay.
So EduClimber specifically, right, is a tool for MTSS, and it's really about intervention. So
What's MTSS? Sorry.
Multi-tiered system of support.
Okay.
And so this is the tool right now that are at the site level. Our teacher support teams, which are teams that are crafted at the site level to richly look at student assessment data, and teachers have the opportunity to bring students that are struggling in classrooms. Data is loaded into EduClimber, and interventions are tracked in this platform. So it gives teachers the opportunity to say the student is struggling academically, behaviorally, or both, and it tracks the interventions to give teachers, leaders, departments an opportunity to say, here is how you may support, and here is what the data is showing as you've implemented that support. So that is the main function of EduClimber, but it also serves as a portal for additional district data that we collect, specifically at the elementary level. So we have some pieces of data related to DRA, which is our developmental reading assessment, the benchmark assessment that we provide to K-5 students, as well as the writing prompts. So it's the place where that data is stored at the elementary level. So last year, Crystal talked about the pilot. K-5 teachers were all trained. TST coordinators at all sites were trained, including middle and high school, as they're running those intervention teams at the secondary levels. And I think the question was posed about it being optional. It's not for our elementary teachers because it serves multifunction in that it's where we load an additional layer of formative assessment data. So it serves two functions.
And when you say elementary, you're talking about in the EduClimber is from K to 5. Is that what we're talking about? For all of the students in K through 5, but it's not for all of the students beyond that. Is that right?
It can house interventions for students in secondary as well. So it gives secondary teachers and those support teams the opportunity to do that as well.
So we're looking at our children, students at the early stages to be able to intervene and get in front of this so we don't have that later on.
That's right. So knowing early how to intervene and what intervention is working or is not working, ideally sets us up to be more successful in the future, and maybe means that they don't need interventions as they move beyond 3rd grade into middle school and into high school.
So it was piloted, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Another great aspect is it provides historical data. So if I had Jocelyn Majors as my daughter, if she was in my class last year, next year she goes to Nicole. Nicole can pull Jocelyn up and see exactly what intervention she had, what worked and what didn't. That's another great, so teachers can see across 3 levels.
how she scored on various assessments.
When you say interventions, you said academic and behavioral. So I guess what's confusing to me is, well, first off, you said DRA. That's an assessment for reading. I thought that that's why we had Universal Screener, that Galileo was going to take the place of everything. Are we still going to have some of these other?
The assessment calendar is still in the works. Dr. Majors and I are reviewing that as we've had some shifts. And so we are determining the assessments that we'll maintain at the district level versus what we will use the universal screener
So
for.
we could potentially, so it won't be it just says universal, it may not be universal. Like
Well, and what
umbrella.
we know is, right, that we likely will still need multiple data points on our kids. So we wouldn't ever just rely on one sole measure to evaluate a student's progress and achievement and advancement, that we still will need some level of triangulation of data to get a really holistic picture of a student. Just like we don't only use MAP to determine, or an EOC to determine a student's effectiveness or achievement.
I thought it was going to be MAP, EOC, and Universal Screener, and that we were giving up iReady and all the other ones. But it sounds like we're giving up iReady, but maybe not all the other ones.
Right, and so the assessment committee is meeting as well as Dr. Majors and I with other members of the curriculum team and district leadership to make decisions about the assessment calendar and what will be required and what will not be required. But prior, developmental reading assessment has been an ideal benchmark to show us where kids are reading on grade level.
So that's complementary with the Universal Screener.
Correct.
Got it. So what it sounds like EduClimber does is that it talks to eSchool for behavior, attendance, all that, because that's where currently all behavior is being tracked. Various levels. That's where you go and mine the data, and that it's going to talk to Galileo for the academic, and it bridges the student information system, which is eSchool for us, and Galileo and DRA and Variety, and that it's going to be the brain that talks between these, so that a staff member can just go to EduClimber and have instant access to the tracking of. So we're not going to use Universal Screener to track academics or eSchool to track behavior. We're just going to interface with EduClimber and house everything there. Am I understanding this? Because I thought we were bringing Universal Screener on, Naviance on, so that we could get away from piecing this out into little things. I thought that they would all kind of go away and we would have these big umbrella companies. Or software, sorry.
So they do all interface and talk, which was one of your initial questions. So yes, the data does merge and is loaded back and forth into all those programs that you just mentioned. The Universal Screener a priority of the Universal Screener was to get rid of all the other places that we were collecting other things. There will still be a need for EduClimber as it stands now relative to the tracking of interventions. So that's the specific component that EduClimber does that Galileo, the Universal
So Galileo and Universal Screener cannot give us that piece, the intervention piece. So that's what I guess you just answered my question. So the missing link, why we need to put dollars towards this, is because those other softwares do not allow us to track.
Right now, that is where we are currently doing that. Whether or not Galileo can in some way function that way will be yet to be determined. But if we were to not continue to track in EduClimber, we would have no way currently for our teachers to continue to design intervention and hold historical context for the plans that are currently housed in EduClimber.
Okay, sounds like while we learn how Universal Screener works, we're going to use EduClimber because we've had some success, we've gotten some training, but I know that we can track because that's how it was sold to us, that hey, this is great because it can track. So with the idea that maybe we can kind of get under one roof, or am I not understanding this?
Right. It tracks academically, so it was never presented that this was going to be something that tracked academics, interventions. It tracks what happens academically once the student goes in and completes the assessment. And I want you to think back many, many years ago so we can show our ages. We used to fill out cards on students. Those who are experienced or retired teachers in the room, remember every year we filled out everything that we did to support a student. It went into their permanent file. Then at the end of the school year, we turned them into the secretary or the counselor who gave them to the next year's class. EduClimber tracks all of that information and keeps it there. But Galileo, that screener, it's only screening in reading and math. and it will track it will give us suggestions of how to support students. We still need to record what services we have provided to our students. We do that through EduCalimer.
I think part of it is having a better understanding of MTSS or RTI kinds of models.
Right.
Where we understand that we are trying to support students at the lowest level of these tiers, and that we have a team that comes together to provide interventions for the teachers so that we can make sure these kids stay in the classroom. And then we have to track those interventions to say whether or not they work. That is what EduClimber does. It tracks those interventions. The progress monitoring is what it says it is. It's a progress monitor, monitoring their progress regarding these benchmarks that are set. Once they have those, we have that data, then we can do an intervention. Yes, that progress monitoring will give you some intervention ideas, but how did the student do on that? You have to put it into a different kind of program.
So I get it now, because, so Universal Screeners Academic, eSchool is still houses attendance, discipline. You could still track through eSchool, but what this provides is the intervention piece of what you're tracking, the interventions, and what you're doing and tracking the interventions.
So I think...
So am I getting this now?
You are, and I think the best example is if you put it in the context of a particular student. So Crystal's a student, right, and she takes her beginning of the year assessment, Universal Screener and Galileo. I see where she is developmentally, right, and then as I give her another progress monitoring, I'm gaining more information. While she's not getting something or something is disconnected, I'm going to pull up her Galileo and I'm going to see the exact places where she has gaps in standards and mastery. I'm then going to go back to the TST team and look over time, has this always been something that she struggles with?
What's the TST team? I'm sorry.
Teacher support team, so the site-based teams that collaborate to help teachers with interventions. And so then I'm going to take it to the team and I'm going to say, this is the gap I'm noticing, here's the interventions that she's received before, do I need to do something a little bit different? I'm going to put that into place, I'm going to track it, and then I'm going to go back to Galileo for the next progress monitoring. Did my intervention impact that? Is she being more successful, not as successful? And ideally, if you follow that process and we still continue to see deficit, right, then we begin to have other conversations like, is there a need? Is there an opportunity for additional services, right? So you have to think about it.
That's all being housed in EduClimber.
Yes.
You say that's all being
the
housed.
interventions that you're talking, and then does it work, so people can go back and look at. When you say TST, you mean like the coaches and the supports?
So the teacher support team is designed by site, so different layers of people could be on it depending on the need. Typically there's a counselor, typically there's a principal, typically there's sometimes the nurse.
So they're the ones,
at all at
so they
different
can
grade
look
levels.
at it, and it brings people together to, so it's a way for everybody to look at the data together.
And to support the teacher in the class.
That's right.
And to right, the software or the people? Okay. Both.
Support the classroom teacher.
Classroom teacher, okay. I'm talking about the software, not, okay. Got it. And then this stays with the student K through 12, and it remains private, and it's not shared? I'm just asking.
You say private.
It stays within the district.
Oh, yeah.
So this information is not shared?
No, we don't, and I think that's a great question
I
as
just
it
wanna
relates
make
to
sure-
not only this product, but other products is, as it relates to data sharing agreements. We're not sharing information with other organizations for research or what have you, so
Because,
we're not
it's
sharing
got
that
the
information.
behavioral component. Sounds like we could have, maybe we have special ed students or students with diagnoses like speech therapy, behavioral therapy. This is all going to be in there. Maybe the work of social workers or psychologists, right? It's going to house all this stuff.
But in-house.
In-house.
For those who need access to that information, so it's not open to every staff member either. So that's a great
But
point.
as they move up the tiers, those people are going to need access to that information.
Well, no, but it stays within the district.
Personal knowledge or need information about that particular student. That's a
About
great
making the
question.
best educational decision for that.
Can I ask a question on that topic? And just to clarify, because anytime you start talking about tracking and data and all that, parents get very concerned about security and privacy. So we may not be sharing that information and we may be holding it, but if it's run through a larger company, a third-party platform, what do we know about what EduClimber is doing with that information? Because ultimately, they have access to it. So are we insured of what they're doing with that information outside of the district?
Do they have access to it? Does EduClimber have access to it?
I mean, that's a Bruce Douglas on the other side of the house as far as privacy and security pieces. So I don't know that John can.
Standard data sharing that we require all software vendors to put in the contract.
And it's usually a fight because it's very restricted. But it's pretty, I think it's pretty simple. We just say, well, we're not going to move forward with the contract, put it in there. In the end, they always agree with that. We can definitely share that thing with y'all.
Yeah, I'd like to know that because I think as we're entering into these, we're in a new world where everything is done through software, and as we're entering into these agreements, every single one has information is valuable, and every single one, or a lot probably out there that can benefit from doing something with that information. So I would like to know how we are protecting.
You mean there's privacy? There's wording to ensure the privacy?
Required. And also, and I think I didn't hold point. Some of the software is housed on our servers. Some of it is cloud-based. And so I think what you're asking about is that cloud-based where they're storing it for us, what measures we have in place. And so that is more of Bruce's question, but we can definitely share out that standard language.
It is pretty, is it not pretty standard for companies that collect data on HIPAA protected kinds of data that they have those kinds of language that is prohibited with regards to sharing that, gathering that information? It's kind of standard.
They all have standard language in their contracts, but often it's not
as strict as the one that we put in.
So you're saying individual data, but can they collectively take the data? Like 25,000 students, like they don't need to know who's Jane or John Doe, but can they have access to the collective data, I assume?
That's what we want to get back to you to make sure that, because we've written things into our agreements, but we want to get back to you, and so we'll have a response back to you.
So like, for example, if I had to give a scenario, I'm just making this up, 10% of students in Missouri, I'm going to link them all, suffer from anxiety. Just throwing it out there. So yeah, there's no student linked, but do they have access to this sort of generalized data? Can you get that back with us? Thank you. Good, thank you. Okay.
I would like to say no.
Okay, so let's see, did we get around to Sharita? Did you send
I do not have anything.
Danielle?
I do not have any questions.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on. Unless, did you have another one? Okay, good. Okay, so there we are. We still have 2 weeks to look and think of other things, and we have a couple questions that have been asked that you are going to provide back to us. So now we will move on to, where are we?
Policy.
Okay, policy adoptions revisions. So we do have several before us, and so John,
all right, so in your board packet, I don't know if you noticed,
so we
there were
read all of those, I hope.
two sections of policies. So there was 5, and then there was 2 under executive content.
He's saying that because some people didn't scroll down and we're calling them to say, I can't find these policies.
So the 2 that are under executive content have to do with leave, and part of the change in language is related to collective bargaining. So that is, we'll get to that here in a second, but we're not ready to discuss that in open. The one part of those 2 policies that is not collective bargaining, but is state legislation requirement is what's called VESA leave. And that's item number 12 at the very end. And it has to do with victims of domestic abuse. And it was state law that was passed in the prior legislative session that we're basically required to follow. So that's just legal compliance. The other component in there is it has to do with some change in the way we handle our short-term leave. So we'll talk more about that in closed session when we do collective bargaining. And then we'll talk more in open session on the 21st. The other policies, again, are pretty standard and meeting compliance with state statute typically. But the first one, BDA, actually has to do with our board meetings. And so our board policy says it will be the 3rd Tuesday of every month. And as you all know, that is not actually when we always meet. So we just changed that to be pretty standard, that we'll have regular meetings each month. Policy EBBC has to do with lactation support. And again, this goes back to state legislation. It actually went into effect this year, and we've already been complying, but providing a space for nursing mothers and even visitors to our campus for school events. JGA is some corporal punishment. It's a corporal punishment policy. You guys are probably well aware that we do not administer corporal punishment, but basically it's simply removing the word isolation out of the policy. And then when you get to JGGA, kind of similar, it's taking out all the language related to isolation. Again, that's due to a change in legislation. And then the final, I guess that's it. And then the other two were the two lead policies. But are there any questions specific to those recommendations? Yes, sir.
So in several of these, am I understanding correctly that there were state law changes and we are changing our policy to reflect those state law changes?
That's correct. And just kind of as a quick summary to that, so we use MSBA, Missouri School Boards Association, as our policy advisor. And so what they do as part of that role is they monitor all legislation that is passed, and then from that, they provide us suggested board policies to make sure we're in compliance. Most of the time, we're going to have an existing policy already where any legislative changes are either applied or added to. And so that's what all of these are, with the exception of the collective bargaining piece that we added and the board date meeting one that we added. These are recommendations from MSBA to ensure we're in compliance.
So if the law is the law and we have to follow it,
Right?
why change board policy if we have to follow the law? It seems redundant.
Yeah, so what it is policy is the broad guidance that everything else operates under, right? So what that does, and even though it's referencing the law, it does a couple things. It lets employees know their rights, okay? And it also is a reference for our leaders, whether it be school leaders or district leaders, to go back to know what they have to comply with. So it kind of serves both of those roles. And board policy is going to be a mix. It's going to have state statutes that we have to have, and often they say we have to have the policy on it. So that's where some of that comes from. But then it's also going to be stuff that isn't state statute that is practice.
And we wouldn't want our policies to be in conflict with the updated law either.
Right.
Of course, but we don't make a policy to reflect every law.
That's correct.
Somewhere we decide we're going to make a policy to reiterate this law or that law, and what you're saying it's the MSBA that advises when we do that or not.
So what will happen in those situations is the MSBA will develop a policy, and so at the front of those policies there was kind of the bold letters where MSBA describes why. But what they'll do is they'll say boards are not required to have a policy on this. However, if you want one, here's what we recommend. So that's what they'll do in those kind of situations.
Another question, but this might be off topic.
There's also, when it comes to situations like that, oftentimes we have safe harbor policies, and safe harbor allows us to be able to react if we don't have something specifically in writing or something that we may not be within compliance with the law. We thought we were in compliance with the law also, and so the safe harbor allows us some limited protection under the law. Danielle can speak to that more than I can.
But definitely we can't cover everything. You're right. So typically what MSBA does is they provide us policies on what we're required to have, and then if there's other legislation where they think we might want to have a policy, then they push that out as suggested.
So as I read through the one on lactation support, it seems like we're committing to a lot of things that could ultimately know that we can commit to. We're putting, whatever language is, you have to have certain rooms with certain features in every building, and we are stuck with certain buildings that we have, and some are bursting at the seams and some aren't. So I'm curious, does this, so I don't have the law, so I'm wondering, does this mimic the law? Are we going above and beyond the law? And have we considered if we're able to do these things under the restraints that we have, and what would the cost be to work around some of our buildings to turn rooms into different things? It seems like we're definitely committing ourselves to something. And I'm wondering, have we understood what we're committing to?
So this is the expectation of the law.
Okay.
And so it's not above and beyond, it's the minimum. And it is not a choice, right? So we have to comply. Now the good news is that we have assessed essentially our facilities, and we are able to comply based on this description. So the things like the refrigerator and the sink, they don't have to be in the room. They just have to be within close proximity. So, when you think about a school building, we typically have a faculty workroom that often has a refrigerator, often it has a sink, not always, but if it doesn't have a sink, there's probably a faculty restroom or something nearby. And then there's other ways within a building to kind of meet the need. But ultimately, if those things aren't there, you're right, this law forces us to do whatever it takes to ensure that they are there.
Kind of like ADA compliance.
Kind of like ADA compliance.
But that answers my question. If this indeed mimics the law exactly, I just don't have the law for reference. I was making sure.
It's listed at the top if you ever
It is.
wanted to go look at it.
State statute.
You could go
Missed
and, yep.
And just for future reference, MSBA will always reference the state statute in that description.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, we also have a form of reporting mechanisms within a policy. And one of those reasons is if there's something of an environment, because not all of our schools, not all of our rooms are all the same, that a request can be made. Even though we're within the law, we can consider a reasonable accommodation that can be made and see if we can make that accommodation. But that doesn't always pan out.
Right. And this only applies if there is a nursing mother in the building, right? So if there's not a nursing mother, we don't have to set aside a space. We have to know what our plan is for when we have that situation and that we're ready to meet that need.
That's students and staff only.
That's correct.
We don't have to accommodate potentially a member of the public.
That would be correct unless it's a school-sponsored event. And then this legislation requires us.
Give me an example of a school spot, like
So a
SPS
ball game.
University?
So mother comes to a ball game and
So pretty much
requests.
we need it in all our buildings. Okay.
Sports.
Are you being facetious?
Too soon, Scott. Too soon.
Why are you starting stuff? Oh my God.
I'm sorry.
To that question, though, it's only if they request it, right? So if a nursing mother comes to a school event and requests a private space, then we have to be ready to provide that.
So we have to have it in case somebody requests it.
We need to know what this plan will be in that scenario. And we talked about that thing today when we had our ELT meeting.
Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh.
No, it's great. Okay. Any other questions?
I think the big takeaway, though,
We're all
there
getting
that
a
I
little
really
giddy.
want to emphasize, and by the way, before this meeting, I said, I hope no one asks about the lactation policy. I don't know that I'm
You knew we
qualified to
would.
speak to it, but
No, we would.
I think the big takeaway is every year legislation is passed that the legislators think will not be a cost that has impacts they don't anticipate. We also, as administrators and as school board leaders, sometimes make decisions where we think the impact will be minimal and it turns out to be greater than not, right? So we all fall into that trap when it's leadership.
Well said. None. We call them unfunded mandates. Legislators. Okay, very good. We're moving on to, let me first ask my fellow board members, does anyone need a short break?
Move it forward.
Okay. Rita says, move it on.
Shouldn't even wait for you to ask the
Move
question.
it on. 6.01, nutrition services management expenditures. Thank you. Dr. Shaw.
The school district provided a request for proposal of the oversight of nutrition services operations back in January of 21, and at the conclusion of that review process, the committee recommended Aramark for food service management services. The contract that was approved by the Board of Education in 21 was a one-year contract with the option of 4 one-year renewals. This recommendation for renewal is the first of 4 of those one-year renewals. The Department of Elementary Secondary Education, known as DESE, also recommends that food expenses, supplies, Aramark, wages and benefits, and administrative management fees also be approved by the board annually, so that these items incurred by Aramark can then be reimbursed by the district each year. You can see a breakdown of the estimated expenses that we anticipate having next year. We say estimated because we don't know the exact amount of participation that would know how much food we spend or purchase. Administrative and management fees from Aramark are based 100% off of a percentage of participation, so that's an estimate. There is their salary and benefit reimbursement. This covers all of the salary, benefit, payroll taxes for all of the Aramark management that are employed for this services. You can see the bulk of this $7.1 million estimated expenses is for food. I will say and can proudly say that one of the major oversights that we expect of a food service management company is to financially keep the district stable in this particular department. And for the past 5 years since I've been here, we have ended every single year in the black from our food service program, which is not the norm across the state. Food service programs often lose money, not make money. And so that's something that we've had a great success rate for. They are responsible for all of the compliance with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and we rely on their expertise for that. All of their compliance involves also the USDA guidelines that they have to follow for the food that's provided, whether that be the fiber content, sugar, calories, sodium content. All of those things are have become much more restrictive than they ever used to when we were in school. So this is an excellent relationship. We're extremely pleased with the work that Aramark continues to do. No food service company is perfect. One of the things that we're especially proud of this year is their effort to rebrand school cafeteria, and now known as the SPS Food Company. And we want where our kids eat to mimic so much more of where, not necessarily what, but the where they eat out in the public. And so if you've been to any of the high schools, you've seen that rebranding begin to take shape. And the tours that I was able to go on, it was amazing to me how different it looked. And we eat with our eyes, and we come back eating because of what we taste. But the environment that we have provided for these kids and staff at these high schools, and it will now continue to move on through the middle schools and elementaries. It just speaks volumes for the effort and the work that they're continuing to do. So this is information tonight. Obviously, this would be the recommendation in 2 weeks to not only do a one-year renewal of the contract, but also this is its own separate agenda item because of the amount of money that we're being asked. Again, every item over $500,000 is a separate agenda item. 2 years ago, Denise is the only one that would remember this, the renewal of the contract was always in the KCOP section because the renewal of the contract is strictly around the administrative and management fees. And then 2 years ago, we would bring milk, bread, ice cream, juice for approval of the board, and that's what you would actually approve. And then Aramark would turn around and they would purchase all of those items, and then we would pay Aramark. And so this is much more consistent with how the contract is written and how it will continue to be written regardless of who the vendor is. So.
Are you ready for questions?
Sure.
This is a good time for us to ask questions about anything related to nutrition services. And I see our nutrition services director.
Tim Keller is here with us, our director of nutrition services. He's actually an Aramark employee, but we treat her as one of our own, and she's part of the administrative team on the operations side, and she has a great team of people that work with her every day.
So I have a couple of questions, but I'm going to save them to the end. So let's start off.
I have some, but
no, I'm good. I don't have any.
Scott, any questions?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Steve, no questions? Sharita?
Not at this moment.
I didn't have any, but now that you mentioned the milk, juice, all that, so that used to be separate, but now it's like all under food.
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
Anything that we serve at breakfast, lunch, we actually have dinners, snacks, all of those things are part of food supply. Anything that they consume and that is part of the reimbursable meal program, that's what's, and again, that's an estimated amount based on historical data and based on participation.
So whether next year, we don't know yet, our understanding is that it's not going to be federally funded.
Correct.
This,
The waiver has ended.
it has, for now, it has ended.
Yes.
So this accounts for that.
Right. Our food costs didn't ever change, whether it was free lunch for kids or not. The reimbursement rate from the federal government is what was different.
Because we might have less consumption.
True, you could.
Do
And
you
these,
see what I
these
mean?
are estimates.
Okay.
No different than the revenue that will be part of the budget presentation. Those are estimates. And we've already, and actually this year, we have had budget amendments because revenues were coming in much higher than anticipated, and expenditures might have been a little bit higher, and so we presented that information to Kara Stasel and Dr. Mulford, and that's part of the Treasurer's report budget amendments.
This is something we have to vote on?
Not tonight.
No, but this is something that
This
the
is,
board
we'll
votes
be
on.
approving the renewal as well as the estimated expenditures.
Thank you.
I guess I do have a question. Okay, the inflation is, we have a lot of inflation included in food. All that's taken into account here.
Yes, every year, we don't just give the same number every single year.
Right.
Joyce is a great, her title is unit controller. She manages a lot of those finances. If you have kids in the district, you'll see that menus come out, but then menus change. And it's about supply issues and supply availability. But yes, milk has gone up. We all see that in the stores. Food has gone up. So yeah, all of these things take into that account. So
great, thank you.
One quick question. I've always been very impressed, like at SPS University, with their food services. But what is done, or is it done, to kind of take a poll of employees and students to see if they're happy about our program?
yeah, we've actually got a student/employee. I don't know, are there parents involved in that advisory group? A menu team that meets annually to review, and we talk about those things, and we get their feedback, and we get their comments about what's good, what isn't.
Also, during my Gather with Grenita events with all the high school students, the student leaders from each high school, we discussed it. And we actually laughed at the fact that this was probably the first district I've been in a long time where there were no complaints about food services and the quality of the food. And that's rare. We might have a difference of opinion of what the menu should be, but the overall quality and the rebranding has been wonderful. Our students, especially some Glendale students, were bragging about how they now have hotel water. It's the infused water with, with lemons and cucumbers and all that stuff. But they said, we now have hotel water. So really trying to give them a glimpse of something different. So.
I have a quick question, I'm sorry.
We also
Are
did
you
a
done?
student viewpoint survey.
Yes.
That give the kids an opportunity to do a survey on what they like, what they don't like, what they'd like to see. A little bit different this year. We allowed elementary students. We'd always done it with secondary students in the past. This year we let elementary parents help students do that as well. So we got some input for that. We should get our data back in the next couple weeks. So that was something we did in March of 22. So we had over 1,500 responses.
So that's all the students you pushed a survey out to?
We did, and we did it different ways. We have like the Scantrons at the high schools. We pushed it out on Chromebooks.
To the parents, did they get emails?
Parents, we had emails, we
SPS?
had communications help us with that, and went out to all the parents. And then we also had posters and cards that we handed out as well. So, of course, not as good as we'd like it to have been, but 1,500's quite a few. So
They go out to teachers as well? I'm sorry, did they go out
to teachers, no.
No, okay.
Students and families.
So, is there, I understand that there's, what is it, USDA guidelines that we have to meet, which I assume are a certain minimum. Do we as a district have guidelines above and beyond that we put forth, I guess, from top down into each cafeteria? And maybe alongside that, is there some sort of plan, strategic plan or mission with our nutrition services of how we view it and what we would like to accomplish with that, and setting forth some of those guidelines that may be above and beyond what the USDA asks?
Some of the above and beyond, we have a wellness committee that we have that has health services, a lot of the other departments within SPS. It has families, parents, teachers, and principals that are on that committee. A good example would be currently with USDA guidelines in a high school, I could sell a child a Diet Dr. Pepper or a Diet Mountain Dew. That's legal to do. As a wellness policy with SPS, we don't allow any carbonated sodas sold from midnight until 30 minutes after school's out for us. So that's a pretty good example.
So this wellness policy exists somewhere that I can see? Could I have that sent to you?
It's on the website.
It's on our website.
And I thought it was going to be read on there tonight, maybe?
You thought what?
I thought you guys had something with that.
I get a link to.
I get a link.
It's on the
When you
website.
talk
the
about
wellness policy.
strategic plan, the Airmark, when we did the renewal, we've been working through a year-long branding strategic plan of changing the way food service looks in schools, and that's not something as just the district that we're able to accomplish ourselves without the help of their expertise. But the overall goal, obviously, is to always look at how we can increase participation with food for kids in schools to where it's something that they want to eat, they love to eat, they continue to eat. One of the best things that I think that Airmark has done this year that we've never had is they brought on, and as part of the, the agreement, the contract was to hire an executive chef, and you guys have all met Kyle. But having that resource and being able to try new foods and to test new foods to make sure that not only is it going to meet the USDA guidelines, but it's going to taste good. Because when you start taking a lot of the sodium out of food, we all know what that does to the food and the taste of that. And we're bound by those restrictions. And we're bound by the caloric intake and the fiber that is required and so forth. And so having that expertise has really been, I think, a game changer on what we've been able to offer and will continue to be able to offer kids as far as food choices go.
So I've heard discussion around this about a lot about trying to make it a more enjoyable experience and providing foods that our students want to eat. I do have a concern if that ever is in conflict with what our students should be eating. So that's where I'm curious is how are we making sure that what we're providing our students is first and foremost nutritious? Personally, I believe what they want to eat takes a backseat to what they should be eating.
It's a balance.
And to me, I know we have a lot of, because these are kids, they don't always make good decisions, right? We're adults, and sometimes we need to make good decisions for our youngest kids, right? I have kids in the district, and I did some substitute teaching, so I am able to see some of the food at times, not a full perspective, but I do see where we make an effort to have things that kids want to eat. But when we have, what's the percentage of students we have on free and reduced lunch?
47.
Yeah, about the 50%.
Okay, so when we have about half of our students where we as a district have determined it's our responsibility to help provide them nutrition. If we're going to accept that responsibility, that it's our responsibility to help them have nutrition, then I think we have a great responsibility to make sure that what we're giving them is nutritious. And to me, a focus on what they want to eat sometimes is in conflict with that. And that's where we end up with some items on the menu, maybe that we just have it there because they'll pick it and they'll actually eat it, when it's possible that not eating could be better than eating something, depending on what that something is.
Well, everything that's on the menu is analyzed nutritionally, and they look at it on a weekly basis. So they'll look at the full week. There's so many different guidelines that we have to follow. The sodium, but there's things like dark oranges and reds. We have to have so many dark oranges and red fruits and vegetables, so many dark green vegetables, so many legumes that are offered each week in every single menu.
Offered, but a child can also, it's my experience that a child could pick, say, a PB&J, sliced peaches, strawberry milk, and apple juice as their meal, right? Which is sugar, 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 sugar.
So we have offer versus serve. So what that means is a student has to choose 3 of the 5 things offered. There's 5 components. So meat alternate, grain, fruit, vegetable, and liquid milk. Those are the 5 components. They have to choose 3 of those, and one of them has to be a fruit or a vegetable, always. So they're always going to have to take a fruit or vegetable. They can take 2 other things, and the reason they do that is they could just be wasted. So if I made you take everything on the tray, and I'm only going to eat 3 of those things, there's no sense wasting the food if you're going to just throw it away. So they give them the option to take 3. They can take up to 6 things if they wanted. So if they want 2 fruits, 2 vegetables, and a milk, that can be counted as a reimbursable meal. They don't have to take an entree. They don't have to take a grain.
So there's a limitation by USDA on the amount of sugar somehow. But if they're able to choose, like what you just said, they could potentially choose, like I said, a PB&J, and then instead of a vegetable, they choose peaches, and then instead of white milk, they choose strawberry milk, right? So is all that adding up to a lot of sugar, right? So how is that regulated?
Like the milk is a 1% flavored strawberry milk, and there's limited sugar. Same with cereals. You know, they're reduced sugars on cereals. We'll bring bread on the sliced bread. So there's lots of pieces and parts to that. Peanut butter, Jeff. So, I mean, it's regular.
A lot of sugar.
But everything meets the guidelines that are provided for us. Everything that we do is analyzed on what it would be in a week's time.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to see some of those minimum requirements, and just to reiterate, I just want to make sure that if we are assuming this responsibility, that we should be providing nutritious meals for those who otherwise can't get it.
We do offer nutrition education with our registered dietitians, so that's one of the things that's a great opportunity for our dietitian to get out in the classrooms and offer nutrition education. And they'll do everything from, they'll show those sugar cubes, or how many sugar cubes are in a can of soda, or about eating the rainbow, and those kinds of things.
Okay, thank you.
Try and tie farm school with that as well.
So we have, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to finish, but we have two other board members that want to have a comment, so we'll go with Mary Ann, and then we'll go finish up with Scott. Couple comments and then a quick question. So I just wanted you to know that the Wellness Committee met, when was that?
April 10th, maybe?
April 10th, okay, and I wasn't invited to it, I just saw it on the district website, and my medical background, I thought, I kind of want to go to this. And I think they're meeting again in June. Oh, no, it's in the fall. And
we try and meet at least four times a year. This year happened to be
I
that
don't know if there's a
triennial
roster,
assessment.
but I sort of kind of pushed I just kind of showed up, and then I went to Jean Corbell. I know she won't be here, but I said, I made her promise that she would email me, because I may miss the, to let me know when the next meeting is, and so that I can just, and I'll let you know if you wanted to attend that. That would be an opportunity, because what I learned a lot is that you're right, and everyone's right. There is a lot of room to grow. There's a lot of things we can do better, and there's some things that have started. It would be interesting to see how they grow. And you were there, and you saw the questions. I asked similar questions. So I will let you know, remind me, in the fall. And then the other, I do have a question, but before that, so just, it might be, just maybe somewhere on your radar, a possibility, as now that our COVID restrictions have lifted, as we visit schools, if there's an opportunity for board members, I'm happy to pay to sample the food.
I would love that. I would love for you guys to.
Really? Okay. Just put it out there.
You're paying.
You're not looking happy.
Do whatever you like to do.
And then the last
Whatever's
question
your
I
pleasure.
had was the COVID policy. So, when I volunteered after school for academic events, kids would get, so like Science Olympiad and, teams that meet afterwards, they would bring in snacks.
Super snack.
So super snack.
But it's a 5-component
Right.
dinner.
And they had like carrots and
Cheese sticks or yogurt or,
So what a lot of the kids did was they would pick one thing, and the rest of it would be headed towards the trash. And then there was me and the teacher like swooping it out, and we put it in the fridge for the kids to use. So that's a fabulous thing that we did, because other kids used it. But when COVID came along, that wasn't allowed. Do you know if that restriction's been lifted?
It has, and we call those share tables. Typically what we try and do is have a share table at every site. It might look like a bus tub with an ice blanket in it, and it's only prepackaged items that can go back in there.
Oh, this teacher had a fridge, so then the kids the next day would go and take things out.
So then if somebody is hungry, somebody comes in late, it's available.
So we're back to that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
You can ask Kyle to do that for the next meeting. We'd be glad to bring him a snack.
Meal to us in there. Maybe.
I'd like to reiterate that I appreciate everything that the entire staff for nutrition services is doing, and I do see the difference. I do think we do have some great options and doing some great things. So as I express concerns about what I am expressing doesn't negate the positives that I see that we're doing.
And then Scott?
Okay.
Teresa, you had
Did
something?
you have
I do
something?
not.
Okay. All right. So I just want permission to challenge you with something, Kelly. I understand your concerns with nutrition and some questions. I understand that, but my challenge is, what does this have to do with the renewal of the contract with Airmark, which is what we're up here today to discuss?
I was told that this was an opportunity to talk about nutrition services, so I asked a couple questions. I didn't know when else I could ask those questions. I was told this was an opportunity to do so.
All right.
Yeah, he had some questions that came up. I said, have these questions? It's coming to us. This is a good time to ask your questions.
Or are you concerned about then the Airmark and the way any concerns with this contract?
I am not. There are limited opportunities as a board for us to discuss things, so as it becomes on topic in certain categories, it's an opportunity for me as a new board member to ask, I think, valid questions. And again, it's the intent of it is high level. That's why I was asking, is there a plan, a strategic plan that we use? My interest is not to get in there and say we need to serve this, this, and this. It's to say, what is our higher level plan regarding nutrition services?
Okay.
I think that because the agendas are set in a certain way, I think it's a good idea when you see a topic that you can be able to have discussions. I think more discussion is always better. So even if there's a way you can bring it in and it's related, I think it's fair game.
Okay, so I'm going to follow up with, let's see where are my questions. Okay, so in the past with our food, we have always had to do our bids, and our bids typically been local. So it's the same thing. So there are bids for milk, juice, fruit, vegetable, and I know one year we didn't get a bid back on bread. I'm just remembering that. So how did
We
that
now
go?
get through Springfield Grocer.
Okay.
We have a separate vendor that does bread, which is flours,
And so the main difference is that Airmark handles all of that process within their team.
Excellent.
And we have great local partners with Springfield
Good.
Grocer, with Highland Dairy, Bowler's Fixtures. Springfield Grocer is the only company that is able to come to our sites multiple times a week, whereas others, there's a once-a-week thing, and we don't have the facilities to be able to store all the food, plus the amazing discounts that we're able to get. The partnership is absolutely the most fiscally responsible way for us to purchase, them to purchase the food, and then the district to reimburse them for that expense.
Well, this makes it very easy because I do recall a year when we were, as a board, we were a little, I would say a little concerned because we were bidding out as a district and we didn't get a bid back on bread. And so we were concerned, where are we going to get bread that we want to get fresh daily? And it was going to have to come in from out of the region. So, do you remember that?
Yeah, I think it's Oklahoma, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so it's very, I'm just going to say thank you to you now that you're taking on all that to get all those items in. And also, just this would be an opportunity to thank you again for back in the COVID days when your team came forward. If I can say this without beginning emotional, on nights and weekends to prepare the number of sack lunches for all of our kids. How many meals did you guys prepare?
Millions.
Thousands.
Literally millions.
Probably millions.
It was 200. I mean, through COVID, it was 2.6 million that weren't seeded meals, like in a bag to go home.
And I don't know if we've seen you since then to thank you
Don't let her get out much.
for that work.
It's me without a hairnet.
And all our families had to do was pull up in front of their
Grab and
school
go, curbside.
and grab meals that would sustain them for Monday, Tuesday, and come back Wednesday, and would take them through Thursday, Friday, and then come Friday and sustain them through the weekend. So we are, and Kelly, you said something about if we accept that responsibility. We do accept that responsibility and always have, and will continue to, and thank you for your good work.
The work they do behind the scenes that nobody sees.
Unbelievable.
Incredible.
Yeah.
It's all with being about 45 employees short. We can't.
And that's right, we are that many short.
42.
42, that was close.
Yep, yep.
Wow, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Good, ready to go. Okay. Are we still on track? Okay. Professional learning plan. We want to see you, John, but we're going to go ahead and...
Did he just walk up there?
You're so used to coming up, right? Let me get you up. It's way down. All right. Hello. I am joined tonight by Dr. Martha Denig. If anybody's wondering about pronunciation, I want to make sure I say it right tonight. We often get it wrong. And she is the Director of Learning Development or Professional Learning for the district. So she and I are here tonight to share a little update with you about the Professional Learning Advisory and the Professional Learning Plan. So you'll recall that in June of 2021, you approved a 3-year Professional Learning Plan. But as part of the responsibility in what's in state statute, we have to provide updates to the progress of that plan, even though a multi-year plan was originally approved. So we're here tonight to do just that, but also to highlight some of the major work of the advisory, to give you additional information about the advisory. For those of you that are new to the board, we are required to have a professional development committee, as DESE defines it. We call it the Professional Learning Advisory, but it functions in the same capacity as outlined in state statute. So primary responsibility for supporting and developing a plan that will align to the district strategic plan, and also speaks to 1% funding and how that will be spent. So those are the highlights of what we'll share with you tonight. I'll give you a little background information to begin, and then Martha will jump in to provide the actual progress monitoring and update to the plan. So just some background information. The Professional Learning Advisory is made up of both of elected, appointed, and facilitators that serve in that role. There are 23 current educators that serve in 3-year terms. So just a reminder, they hold the responsibility of upholding the DESE Professional Learning Guidelines. So they are elected, they are certified full-time staff, and like I said, serve in 3-year terms. We prioritize that 1/3 of those members rotate annually. That gives us both historical context, but also new perspective, because we know that the learning needs of our staff are ever evolving and changing. So it's important that our advisory represents the dynamic pieces to education, and that we are always bringing on those new members. I'll reference several times the attachments that are linked in board docs, because that gives you a fuller picture of what we're presenting tonight. So if you click on, I think it's attachment C or the third one down, if you're loaded into board docs, those are the names of the members of the advisory that served this year. Just a reminder to you again that that's all listed there, as well as the plan. So if at any point you need to reference those, they're all listed for you in board docs. I do want to let you know that these positions are communicated and applications are accepted annually, and there is an election to fill them. The advisory did make the decision to add 2 positions for next year, again, about making sure we have representation from a variety. So choice programs, gifted ed, and launch will all be represented that were not before. So again, I've already kind of alluded to this, but we will speak to organizational procedures tonight, to the professional learning plan specifically, and then Martha will end with the projected budget. So when you think about the advisory's role, the organizational procedures that are linked for you really outline the responsibilities of the advisory. They exist to ensure that 1%, like I already said, of those state funds that are received through the foundation formula are allocated to the professional learning for certified staff. So learning development oversees the allocation with the advisory's input to ensure that those funds are spent and that they are spent in support of the district's plan. They use multiple sources of data to make that decision, as you've seen in the plan. They also make updates to action steps and progress monitoring measures for the plan, and really serve as the advocates. They speak for the larger group of teachers relative to learning needs, to outcomes, and to how professional learning is being implemented and the impact it's having on our system. I'll invite you to take a moment just to read the quote on the screen. Much of the advisory's work, or if not all, is grounded in research, so take a moment. So what we know is that we can put many things into place to support increased student achievement in the system, but we would be remiss not to focus our efforts and attention on the adults that are in front of our students on a daily basis. That includes both teachers and our leaders. And this is really about a belief that we hold in SPS, which is about collective efficacy, right? And that's the idea that all of us together have the tools, skills, and abilities to increase student achievement for all kids. And so that is a commitment the advisory holds and is central to how they design and develop plans for support. I also want to just remind the board that the way that we engage in dialogue and discussion relative to professional learning is through professional learning communities. The graphic that you see there is how that process works and plays out. And all of that and those discussions at the site level and the district level are grounded in the 4 critical questions of a PLC that you see here. So it's really all about what students know and can do, how we assess that in an ongoing way, how we respond when students are not making gains, and how we respond when students already have mastery of the content. So again, it's about our students and where they come in no matter what level. Do our teachers have the skills to provide really rich learning opportunities to all of our kids, and how we can ensure that that is happening? So this is what we know, that high quality professional learning with effective collaboration, which is what we just talked about in PLCs, builds our educators' skill and knowledge, which increases their effectiveness and their efficacy, and that the byproduct and result of that is increased student achievement. So alignment is also part of the requirements in state statute for the professional learning plan. So we've highlighted here, as you've seen in the full plan that's linked, that we align to the district's strategic plan. Desi's words are CSIP, so Comprehensive School Improvement Plan. Our Comprehensive School Improvement Plan is the strategic plan. And so that is what the PL advisory aligns their plan with. Our focus really lives in empowered and effective teachers when you think about the goal of professional learning. However, student success is always central, and we have a moral, obligation to ensure that we know how to educate students no matter how they enter our doors. Whether they are a student that didn't have access to early childhood care and are stepping into our doors already behind, or if they are a student that had a plethora of a library at home and parents that were able to read to them every single night. We want to be able to meet the needs of those students no matter where they are. The other piece of alignment that's important to the advisory is the superintendent's entry plan. So while the board approved a multi-year plan last year, it is a priority to the advisory that they are continually aligning to district priorities. And Dr. Latham provided a great entry plan for that advisory to link to and to make changes and adjustments because of. So the next section really lives in the space that Martha oversees on a daily basis. So she's going to walk you through what updates and progress monitoring to the plan has been done, as well as the current budget and the projected budget for 1%.
Thank you. And thank you, board, for having me this evening. And for those of you new to your service, thanks for the work you're doing. And for others, it's great to see you again as we bring forward the professional learning plan annually. And so as the advisory has worked throughout the year, it was really clear through all of the data that the overarching goal, which you see on this screen, is still the purpose of professional learning in our system. It's about the strategies, skills, and concepts that increase our capacity so that we can be better tomorrow than we were today for our students. And how is it that we best impact our school communities with all the factors that are at play? And so then within that overarching goal, we have 3 sub-goals, again, clearly aligned to all the work that Dr. Holt spoke to. The academics, climate and culture, and equity and diversity. How are we ensuring that we as educators are fully ready and prepared to teach all of our students in a way that they need it? How do we ensure that we have that climate and culture that really is impacting and fostering a sense of belonging for all of us, and not just our students, our colleagues, everybody who walks through the door, our families. And then the equity and diversity piece. How do we ensure that we advocate and ensure that all of our students have the opportunity to grow and learn to meet those grade level standards? And are we equipped with those strategies, skills, and concepts to do that? And so those 3 sub-goals still live within. The advisory, after looking at all the different data points that we look at over the course of the year, thought that's still what we're doing. We were very intentional last year when the 3-year plan came forward to have it as a living document so that we were sure to be reflective with new superintendent leadership of where are we headed and what is still important for our work, along with the continued metrics of student learning. And on top of that, we're coming out of a pandemic. And so that was important as well for the advisory to consider all of that. And so some quick celebrations, really in each of the 3 sub-goals. In the academics, in our perceptual data that comes from the needs assessment, it is on the rise that teachers feel there's a sense that their professional learning is transferring to the ways in which they're doing things with kiddos, when it comes to instruction, when it comes to meeting unique needs. And so that is on the rise through the perceptual data of the annual professional learning needs assessment. For climate and culture, the work of adaptive schools is really about how do we be collaborators. Dr. Holt mentioned this idea that we know collective efficacy has high impact on student learning. We can't say we can accomplish and do what we're going to do if we can't be collaborators and choirs and leaders together. That's what the work of adaptive schools is doing for the system, is really helping to build our how. How do we be collaborators and sit down and have those conversations around those 4 essential questions? What do our students need to learn? All of those pieces. But partnered with even the adaptive schools learning experience, which actually impacts academics, is just the continued elevation of climate and culture with we're a collaborative community. Rather than being in a competitive community with each other in the classroom to classroom, we're opening up to collaboration, learning from one another. And so that's having a positive impact. And then also there's some indicators in the perceptual data that inclusivity and safe environment of the educators, feeling that that is on the rise as well. For the equity and diversity piece, it's really this idea again of a safe and inclusive environment for all students. Dr. Holt said it well already. We have the moral responsibility to ensure that every student who walks through our doors feels like they belong, has their basic needs met, and can learn. And so it is, how do we as teachers make sure we are ready to step alongside each and every child? And so that is the piece there, partnering also with that advocacy and engagement for all kids. We want every student to come into the classroom and learn. That's why we're here. So with all of that in mind, we do have some challenges, which likely would not be a surprise. And the data is very reflective of anything when it comes to change. You start to make some refinements, and it takes some time to see your metrics move. Our current iReady data at the end of the year this year, or mid-year I think is what it was, is pretty stagnant to where it was a year ago. Lots of factors we can unpack around that, but we won't. Instead, what we'll say is let's continue to do better for our kids. And with the new movement of the universal screener and some real intentional training, professional learning for our teachers, I think we'll see a different metric there within a year. Climate and culture, data that surfaced there with needs assessment is the perception that our leaders maybe are not as, don't have as much opportunity to be as engaged with the site professional learning that all of our sites do throughout the year, that there's actually some decrease in some of that needs assessment data. And I think that points to a lot of things, a lot of the demands that have been on all of us this year. And so how is it that we continue to develop our ability to be leaders of learning, no matter who we are in our buildings? And actually, little sidebar, site professional learning is one big piece that we do every summer to kick off for the next year. And today we had a really successful day with our 5 high school sites and 1 elementary site. As teams came and started thinking about how do we really continue to impact climate and culture for a positive professional learning experience next year. And so that already I think is going to continue to help that sub-goal. And then again, if you look at our data, as I think you know, we have not reduced the discrepancies in our subgroups notably yet. Do I believe we will continue under that piece of equity and diversity? Absolutely. But it's still a piece that the advisory is very aware of and passionate about,
And what is it that teachers need most in their educational toolkit to be able to meet the diverse needs of learning and be able to respond accordingly? So really, overarching goals, sub-goals didn't change. There's celebrations and challenges. Where the revisions are per the advisory of that elected group is within each of these three. Some slight revisions to action steps, and then we added some additional progress monitoring. What you will see in each of those action steps is really refinement of language or of intentionality to what the system is recommending forward with an entry plan, with the work that we are continuing to do. It continues to be extremely aligned to what we're trying to accomplish in SPS. So then, why does the plan even matter? Through the state guidelines, it's the idea that we set out the site or the district professional learning plan because that is then what drives the state 1% fund. So what is important to note, in 1993, the Outstanding Schools Act passed expectation that 1% of state funding is spent on site professional learning. And your PDC, your Professional Development Committee, or APL Advisory, provides oversight. And so that plan then drives how does that 1% money get spent. The 5 categories that typically, historically, probably for 20 years, have fallen into sites, meaning what percent or what portion of that do we push out to each of our 50+ sites so they can get the resources that they need for the professional learning they're doing at their sites. So that's one category. The next category is teachers. The advisory has strongly upheld the belief that if we're asking teachers to do learning outside of their workday, we should compensate them for it. And so that is a big chunk as well. Substitutes, that is if professional learning is happening during the duty day and a substitute is required for the classroom, then that is provided through these funds, which is an allowable expense in the state. Travel, so we utilize this for in-state travel to attend professional learning for a variety, either site individuals, leaders, a variety of individuals, mileage reimbursement for those specialists that are providing professional learning between anywhere from 3 to 7 to maybe even 10 buildings. And then also the state conference. Missouri Learning Forward is an arm of Learning Forward, which is an international organization for professional learning. And Missouri Learning Forward has a great conference annually, and it is in the organizational procedures of the PL Advisory that we can send up to 6 members. And so we do that as well. And then last but not least, resources and supplies that support professional learning. And these always have to point back to the adult learning, not to student learning. So it's how do we purchase or have the resources or supplies that are needed for that. So with that, I want to share a quick image that I brought to you last year. This is how FY22 budget allocation was set forth. From the PL Advisory, they said, hey, I actually think things are going to be a little bit back to normal in FY22, and we might put some of the money towards substitutes because we'll pull teachers out for professional learning, and we might reinstate some state travel. So that was what we thought might happen, or how the advisory wanted to prioritize spending. And instead, there you go. We actually increased site funding and put more money out to sites to spend on professional learning because the reality was quick to say, you're not traveling for professional learning, you need the money to have the resources within your building. And so if that was specific book studies that were happening, or I'm trying to think other materials that teachers might need to really develop their understanding of meeting literacy needs for kids. All of that, though, is decided upon by site in alignment to their school action plans, which are in alignment to district plans, and the district professional learning in alignment with strategic plans. So the goal is that we're all working in alignment and we're not going rogue with ideas. So that is how last year ended up. Likely you know with funding that it's a moving target. If we are getting 1% of state funding, we have a projection of what that will be, but it moves a little bit, and so we have to be pretty fluid. The state does permit that you can keep 1/4 of those funds forward to the next fiscal year. And that has been helpful as we haven't had near the expenditures normally we would for travel and substitutes. So then the advisory every spring weighs in on, with our next year's budget, how would you like to see the allocation? And so as they've looked at how money has been spent on professional learning over time, this is the recommendation for the current year, this coming year. And again, it's, let's get some money out to sites to use that for their site professional learning aligned to their school action plan. Teachers, I will speak to this real quickly. You might be wondering what professional learning, I mentioned that it's the professional learning that teachers do outside of their duty day. And that is a variety of things. Specifically, our biggest chunk is for our early career teacher program, which is called Step Up. So our early career teachers get beyond state expectation for learning so that we retain them and they are the best they can be, and we definitely compensate them for that work. So with that, what questions might you have or clarity can we provide?
I know. Good. Questions? Not seeing any.
Oh,
are we going in order?
Are you going to ask individuals, or are you just asking?
No, I'm just looking for anyone to give me a finger up that they have a question. I've got Mary Ann. I knew that. Okay, I have one. Okay, Kelly?
You mentioned that we have iReady data in that is stagnant. Is that what you said?
I did use from middle of the year from like last year, what would that be, 2021 to middle of the year this year, it was still in like the upper 30s.
So maybe I misunderstood this. I know that towards the end of the year, kids took iReady. Do we have that data in? Is that what you're referring to?
That is not included in this, as the PL advisory met in April for the final time before that data was out. So when the advisory is back together in the fall, we would bring those metrics forward and we talk about how they fit into this.
It's about timing.
Yeah, it's all about timing.
Do we have that data somewhere, I guess, compiled? Does it happen that fast?
End of year iReady data?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have it internal in our system, has not been shared anywhere else, right? So window closes, I think it was mid-May, second week in May, and so then it will be compiled and then pushed to cabinet for review first.
So is that something that you would look at, say, end of this year compared to end of, like, I'm thinking end of this year compared to end of last year, end of year prior? Is that something that you compile that data in a very, I guess, tangible way that just shows year over year changes?
The advisory wouldn't compile that data, right? Our data and analytics department would, and then it would be something that was given to the advisory for review to make any adjustments or modifications to update this plan.
Is that something that would be able to be shared with the board?
The data?
Yeah, and the reason I'm interested in it is because the map test data really lags, right?
Yes.
But the iReady happens really fast. So if it's a glimpse of how we're doing now, I would love to be able to see that rather than waiting until next December or whatever it is to see how it looks like we may be doing now versus last year and the year before.
Yeah, what we know about iReady is to some degree it's predictive, right? So the preference would be that at some point before beginning of the year you would want to see, this board would like to see end of year iReady data.
Is that normal? Is that something that's generally presented to us, or is that something that's more just kept among staff to?
In prior years, it's been reported in our strategic plan updates, and so with that, the revision to that happening, that will be part of the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Danielle?
Two quick questions. I know that it was represented in a pie chart, not necessarily actual numbers, but FY22 actual to FY23 budget. I saw that the travel percentage doubled, or more than doubled. But the substitute teacher percentage only went up by about 2%. How does that, I assume when teachers are traveling that they would probably need substitutes, is that correct?
That is a good point. I think a lot of the travel happens not within the school.
Okay.
Like within the 185 days, but it might happen, during the summer. is really the biggest piece. And honestly, our substitute at 9%, that can cover, that can cover the needs from the travel.
Okay, thank you. The other one was, thank you for detailing the celebrations and challenges, and some of those were based on more concrete data like iReady, but then sometimes you said that it's the perceptions of educators, and that's where you were getting the celebrations and challenges. Where is that data gathered?
Yeah, so part of the responsibility through the state guidelines is we have to run an annual needs assessment every year. And so every spring that is sent out to teachers, and we work with the AAA department to ensure that that is done. And the questions are created, the advisory is really the voice behind all of it. What is it that we need to know from our colleagues, and how is that data then going to inform our next steps? And so that happens annually, and that is a state expectation. And so from there, then the advisory gets all the data, they start digging through it, read through it. It's mostly closed, some open-ended responses, and they truly believe that if we're going to ask the questions, it's our responsibility to read every single piece of it, and they do.
On page 7 of that plan, there's a live link that takes you to the questions that are posed, and those are the questions that are listed, like if you look at progress monitoring, the actual question is what the data is from that needs assessment. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Okay, Miriam.
First, I want to say thank you for answering my questions, and Dr. Mulford was able to make further clarifications. It's always easier spoken than written. A couple of questions. So the site money, so I assume that the advisory or uses some guideline to allocate funds, and then does the principal become the gatekeeper as to how it's then?
We actually, every site has a site professional learning system, the SPLS acronym liaison, and they are trained through our department to then provide oversight, but they work in tandem with the financial secretary at each site to make sure that what is supposed to hit that account hits that account, and they provide a ledger, they turn it into us.
So they work with the principal and the financial secretary.
So it's a team. So a need would be presented to the team. A teacher or a group of teachers may say, we would like to use the site allocation to do X, to go to this learning or to buy this
So the
resource.
teacher at school A will say to the principal or to the advisory?
To the liaison.
To the liaison.
And
Then-
there is a request form they fill out, and they have to show a
So then the
line.
liaison works with with the PL advisory and with the principal to...
And typically, they also involve the site-based professional learning team. So Martha just alluded to teams from sites coming together to help design school action plans and design the learning needs for their site for the year. So typically, those requests via the liaison come back to that team with the principal to just determine how that money might be allocated across the site.
For that year, how they're going to... Okay, so then in the pie chart, so the teacher reimbursement is for when they're learning outside of duty time?
It is. I mean, that has been the historical.
That's been the historical. So in the, it looks like, so again, because people couldn't travel, there was more site opportunities, and then the teacher part of the pie increased. But again, the same question with the substitutes. There's very few substitutes. So I'm assuming that this learning was happening
outside the school day.
Outside.
But yet this
summer.
Oh, okay, that's why the substitute didn't grow, because it was during the summer. So can you give me some examples of site learning? So, because in my mind, I'm thinking, there's a great program and we're going to go learn about it. Sometimes we don't go to learn about it. They come to us and make a presentation. So would that be like a site? Is that an example of a site?
It is. And I think often when we think professional learning, we think you need a presenter to come and speak to us, and this is your professional learning. What we know from Learning Forward, the international organization, is there are actually like 25 different learning designs. Collaborative teams are a learning design. And so in SPS, we talk about, if we are sitting down and talking about what do our students need to learn and how are we going to know if they learned it, and we are sitting there as a group of 3.
That's actually professional learning, correct?
That's closest to your job, professional learning. where
Because
we're
you're learning
sitting
from
there.
each other and, okay.
And we're doing research and design work right
So
there.
that counts,
But learning from a coach, like a numeracy coach or a literacy coach, that's not it.
That happens as well with
that-
your collaborative teams. That's built into your.
But during the day, for example, you have somebody come and observe and give you
Grade
tips.
level team meeting.
But those don't count. This is when you come together.
Well, those don't have an additional expense because it's part of the expectation within the contract.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Sharita? Any questions? Okay, Scott?
No, you guys asked all the questions I was going to ask, so I'm good. Thank you.
Steve?
Not here.
Okay, good, very good. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
And work on this.
Use a break then.
Okay, so right now we're going to take a short break. We'll be back in here in 4 minutes. 4 minutes.
I don't want to mess it up.
Back in here
Let's
at
go.
10.
What I do.
And take much to convince me to do that. Okay, we're a little 2 minutes short, so let's
Yeah, I don't often wear those, but yeah.
move it on. Okay, nice break. We're moving on to 6.03 collective bargaining agreements. Thank you.
So this will be short and sweet because most of our conversation will happen during close. As you are aware, we started collective bargaining back in February. We just wrapped that up in the last week or so. And so it is in the process of being ratified by the respective groups. Therefore, it's not information that will be shared in public at this point in time, but we will answer any questions the board has during close this evening. We currently have 6 groups that collective bargain. SNEA represents 5 of those, so we have the teachers group. There's other positions that are wrapped into that, but we'll call it the teachers group. The nurses group, the custodial and maintenance group, clerical, school police, and then the Teamsters represents transportation. Those groups make up about 70% of our employees, so the bulk of our employees collectively bargain already. We do have some other groups that are in the process of forming a bargaining group, and so there's 2 that have actually already held elections, and that went through the State Board of Mediation. So for those of you that were on the board when the school police formed, that went through you instead of the State Board of Mediation, but the others went through the State Board of Mediation, so there's no action required by the board on those groups. But we have what's called the Support Staff Professionals Group that has recently formed, and so next year we'll be putting together a collective bargaining agreement for that group. Excuse me. Then we have the Specialized Instruction Support Personnel Group, and they will also be putting together an agreement. And then we have the Springfield Nutrition Services Group that will be having an election at some point this summer or early fall. So by that point, almost all of our employees will be in the bargaining group. SNEA is the group representing all of those. And I think Laura is here in the back. I want to make you stand up. Really comfortable. So Laura will not be here on the 21st when we talk about it. Melissa Albright will be. I just want to recognize Laura. She's had some late nights, early mornings, busy weekends as we went through this whole process. We weathered the storm, we made it, and I think we have a good product to bring before the board. So with that said, we'll just move on from that topic since it's not open for discussion.
Hey, John.
Yes.
Who are support staff professional group? Is that
So that's going to be
paraprofessionals?
paraprofessionals, interpreters, behavior techs, and classroom LPNs.
And then who are specialized instructional support?
It's going to be SLPs,
Oh my gosh,
OTs,
what is that? What's
PTs,
language pathologist? Speech language pathologist. Okay.
speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, social workers,
TT. Okay.
school psychs.
School psychs. Okay, got it.
Okay, so basically those professional positions that don't fall under the teachers.
Right.
Okay. All right. And we're moving on to the budgets. And while Kara's...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, moving on, 7.01, 2022-23 budget recommendation.
Okay, so while we're getting all that ready, in your board packet, there are 2 items. One is this presentation, which is really intended for the public more than it is anyone else, so that they can get a generalized breakdown of the budget and what is inside of it and the priorities. And then there's the actual budget document. And I want to point out, give credit to Ms. Stasel and her team, Chastity Daniels, who's our Director of Business Services. Again, they put in a lot of long hours, late nights, trying to get this to you at this study session, which traditionally this budget document does not come to the board until the regular session. And you'll notice that the document has some additional information for those of you that have been on the board than what it previously had. We tried to break it down by building. And then also there's some historical information in there about enrollment and fund balance. And so hopefully it's a document that you find valuable, that the public finds valuable. We'll continue to grow that and work on that document based on feedback we get from you on what would be useful. So most of the information in here we covered during our small group sessions. So we're not going to go through every item. We'll kind of highlight the big pieces. And certainly if you have questions, I would say ask us as we go through it versus at the end. Probably the easiest. So Karen.
Awesome. So this recommendation represents the best information we have at this time. We have certain assumptions that we've made as a part of this presentation and the projections that will be finalized kind of as at a later date. But we use those assumptions combined with historical data to put this proposal together, and then as we go through the fiscal year next year, we'll bring amendments and transfers to you guys as the information changes. So these are the budget development presentation objectives for this evening. We will go through the budget development process and timeline review. We'll review the primary operating revenue changes, operating expenditure priorities and changes, as well as proposed budgets for debt service, bond, capital, HBT, and GoCaps. This slide just represents a budget presentation schedule review. So we've come a long way since January when we kicked this off. It includes a variety of budget presentations that happened at board meetings, and then some small group Board of Education budget meetings that occurred in April and in May. And then we have the budget recommendation tonight, and then the vote will occur on June 21st. And just as a reminder, the board does have to adopt the budget by June 30th. So this slide provides a timeline for the budget development process. So as we've kind of mentioned, the process kicks off every year in January with a variety of meetings, discussion with leaders, the requests for budget come forward, we land the priorities for the budget prioritization, and then all of that work culminates into this meeting and to the vote. And then throughout the year, again, the monthly budget alignment happens through the treasurer's reports as needed. All right, so we'll hop into operating revenue. This is going to look familiar because all of this was presented to you in small group meetings. Basic formula and classroom trust fund estimated increase for next year is $185,264. Some assumptions made to get to this number were using the state adequacy target of $6,375 as provided to us by DESE. That number has not changed now for the fourth year in a row, and is not projected to change next year either. Also, we are using the provision that allows us to go back to FY20 weighted average daily attendance. So that provision, without that provision, we were estimating a decrease of $8.9 million. That provision allows us kind of a year of breathing room, and we're hopeful that next year our attendance and our free and reduced lunch numbers do increase over the last 2 years.
Point of emphasis I want to make on that state adequacy target of 6375 is when the current funding formula, was adopted in 2004-05, the state adequacy target was $6,117. It took several years before the state legislature was able to fully fund the formula. But that adequacy target since 2005, so 17 years ago, has increased 4%. 4%. In 17 years. Okay, so when you think of that and you think of cost of living, 7-8% increase over just last year alone, yet our state funding, the target that we shoot for, has barely increased. So I want you to put that in perspective. We're very grateful for a formula that's fully funded, for a transportation formula that's fully funded, but we still lag far behind where we need to be from a state funding perspective.
So the transportation formula has an estimated increase of $2.2 million, and that is due to a potentially one-time fully funding of the transportation formula for next year. And so that projection assumes that our transportation costs for the current year are going to increase to like that pre-COVID level, and so we'll be reimbursed off of this year's transportation eligible expenditures. Operating fund revenue for local tax. So assumptions that we've made to get to this increase of $3.6 million are just based off of strong new construction numbers that we got from the assessor's office, some preliminary numbers. So 75 million in new construction when we've typically been around 35 to 40 million. So that has helped out a lot. We're estimating 715 million in personal property, and then this assumes a 96.5 collection rate. Final assessed valuation data will be received in August, and the tax rate levy will be set at that time. I do anticipate some sort of budget realignment amendment to come forward as we have the best information.
Another piece of commentary. So when state funding stays relatively flat, local funding is really the only way to fund and pay for teachers and everything else. It's the only way to make it happen. So that burden is certainly shifted to the local property owners.
Proposition C, so as a reminder, this is a 1-cent sales tax that is collected locally, and then it is given to the state, and the state then distributes that those revenues to districts based on the weighted average daily attendance. So our estimated increase for next year is $1.1 million. This assumes $1,259 per WADA, and the pandemic provision does apply to Prop C, so we were able to use FY20 WADA as well. So just as kind of a comparison, this time last year, the per WADA number was 1,047. So that's a 20% increase in that per WADA number over this time last year.
Everybody know what WADA is?
Weighted average daily attendance.
Weighted average daily attendance. Okay.
Can you repeat what you said? What was the WADA?
This time last year, 1,047.
But had we not, what we're going off of 2 years ago, which is the WADA.
FY20, we're using FY20 WADA. We used FY20 WADA this year, but that per dollar amount from DESE, they give us kind of an estimate on how to budget. So this time last year, they were telling us to budget on 1,047 per FY20 WADA. That has increased now to 1,259 per FY20 WADA, so a 20% increase. All right, so this is just a review of our 2022-2023 budget priorities. These were developed through the recommendation and feedback from the Board of Education and the executive leadership team. And we'll dive a little bit more into these on the next slide. So starting with priorities number 1 and 2, this is all about our staffing. And we have a budget recommendation increase of $12.7 million to support salaries, plus retirement, Social Security, and Medicare employee match. And as previously mentioned, the recommendations from the collective bargaining process will be presented June 21st. Also around budget priorities 1 and 2, we have a recommended increase on the premium rate for medical or for health. Right now we are estimating a 5% increase. The $630,793 represents the increase from January 2023 to June 2023. So next year, if this holds true, we would see another recommendation increase for July to December. So plan designs and rates will be provided by October 1st, 2020, probably well before that. Budget priority 3, strategies and staffing for support of under-resourced and underrepresented students. You'll see that we have a budget allocation for 2 teachers for Jobs for America's Graduates, or the JAG program, 1 teacher at Studi and 1 teacher at Hillcrest, and that does come with a revenue offset. Also, we have an allocation to reclassify 2 paraprofessionals into 2 certified positions to support the Studi nursery. Budget priority 4, instructional and/or support staff who impact classrooms. So we have staffing allocations at Ag Academy to kind of expand that program. We have some increased staffing for the International Baccalaureate program to ensure we're being compliant with IB standards.
Kara, on the last slide, when you said revenue offset, so that's the state reimbursing us the $60,000?
This would be federal funds.
A federal fund, okay. So the JAG is a federal program? Got it.
It is. And just so in case you don't know, the governor and his wife were co-chairs of the state JAG board. So when he was lieutenant governor, he really got on board. He was the co-chair at that point. And really promoted this program. It's a great program that develops employability skills and targets students who are at risk really of not being productive citizens. It teaches them, how to shake hands, how to dress appropriately for a job, it sets them up with internships and mentorships and those kinds of things. Really, I'm pretty passionate about it. I've had it in both my prior districts, and I've seen it really change lives. And so we're excited about the expansion to Hillcrest. But they do pay.
So we didn't have it at all in the district?
We had it at Studi.
Only at Studi. Okay, but now it's going to be expanded to a much larger population.
Correct. Yeah. So we will get $30,000 per program.
Oh, so even despite, regardless of the size of you get 30,000.
There's a minimum. You have to have a minimum of 25 students. And you're actually limited to 45 max.
Oh, of students that can participate?
Right, because they really want the teacher to do a deep dive with those kids at the greatest risk.
So we're going to have 45 students at Studi and 45 at Hillcrest, max.
Yeah, max. Minimum of 25.
Thank you.
So continuing on with budget priority number 4, we have additional staffing increases for special education to support our special education students and staff. And then we do have a staffing increase for elementary specials in the areas of art, music, physical education, it's hard not to say PE, physical education, and library. Budget priority number 5, an item I'd like to highlight tonight really is that per pupil instructional allocation. So we are going to see an increase in the per pupil allocation for school instructional supply and purchase service budgets. As well, we are forming a centralized art consumables budget. So art consumables will no longer be purchased out of the school's instructional budget. So at the elementary school level, the per pupil amount is going up by $1. At the middle school level, it's $1.25, and at high school, it's $1.50.
It doesn't sound like much, but when you take out the art supply costs, it'll be roughly like a 5% increase.
Continuing on with budget priority number 5, we have the universal screener that was previously approved by the boards. We have that academic software reduction in contracted services, plus the universal screener, and a portion of that is funded by ESSER, and then some information technology and professional learning staff. And then this represents just some general operating support changes, insurance increases, fuel increases, utility increases. I wish I could say those were going down. Maybe next year. Maybe we'll say we'll have a reduction because everything's so cheap. Also impacting operating funds includes launch. So launch is embedded within the operating sub-funds. We are anticipating a reduction in enrollments for next year, so there is a reduction in revenue and expenditures to offset those. While we anticipated a reduction in enrollments at the elementary level this time last year, that wasn't quite realized, that they were still needed this year. So we aren't projecting quite the decrease that we may have, but a little bit of decrease in drop in enrollment is expected. Out of that net operation, there is a return to SPS to support the infrastructure. So based on this projection, we will see a return of $2.2 million next year. And then the launch program itself has a restricted operating fund balance each year equivalent to 10%, so $1.8 million expected for next year. Continuing on the next slide is just a snapshot of the launch financials that we prepare internally each month just to keep track of this. And an item to note is that if SPS had purchased virtual learning from a for-profit provider in the current school year, it would have cost in excess of $7 million. the operating fund. So having launch is a great benefit to not only the district, but to Missouri teachers, Missouri kiddos, Missouri educators. So just wanted to point that out. So this just provides kind of a summary of the operating revenues that we've talked about, not including ESSER. Same with expenditure changes on the next two slides. So that kind of wraps up the non-ESSER portion of the operating fund. So we'll hop into ESSER 3. So our ESSER 3 allocation is $61.5 million. It's hard for me to even say an amount that high. So in order to kind of provide the continuity and services and programming, we're going to do half of that allocation in 22-23 and the other half in 23-24. And here are the preliminary categories and the dollar amounts listed with those categories.
I want to remind the board that we are required to spend 20% of these funds in those first two categories. So we are almost 30%, but we have to do a minimum of 20.
All right, so category 1, recovery of learning during the school day. We have the continuation of some K-8 literacy and numeracy interventions, mental health and general health supports, and the universal screener portion that is funded by ESSER. Category 2, student supports beyond the school day. We have the continuation of the hotspot fleet, before and after school services, SPS University, in addition to the student mentor supports, developing a program for that, and then the college and career planning tool, Naviance.
All right.
Category 3, staff supports and retention. So we do have several items here that are just moving forward from ESSER 2 into ESSER 3. And I just want to note that over half of our allocation really is being spent in the staff support and retention area. And then category 4, operational supports. We have some ERP supports as we implement the Oracle system, some human resources and payroll staffing, and then some facility improvements that will take place. All right, so that wrapped up operating, and so now we'll just jump into debt service. So for FY23, we have a $34.6 million revenue budget and a $77.9 million expenditure budget. That expenditure budget is higher because 2 bond series will be paid off in the next year. So Series 2012 and 2013, which are listed in the debt schedules as a part of the budget document, will be paid off next year. So that is the reason for those higher expenditures and kind of that lower fund balance as we start paying off some of our debts. We'll continue to pay off some of it. Capital projects fund, so $7.7 million in revenue. Most of that is interest income, and then we have our M&M surtax that goes into this fund right now. And then $24 million in expense. We have a proposed transfer from operating for the next year of $11 million. And our capital projects fund balance is very healthy right now. It's very stable, and it allows us to continue on with those capital projects and those life cycle replacements and be able to honor a lot of the capital requests that come forward as a part of the capital planning process that takes place each fall. Bond funds. So as we wrap up the bond funds, you'll note that we are projecting to end next year with a $0 fund balance. So bond funds will be wrapped up, and we always include the link in this presentation to the bond information that's posted on the website in case anybody wants to go take a look at the process that began in April of 2019. This one's kind of new this year. So when the bond passed in April of 2019, the district and the board at that time committed up to $20 million in a capital project investment fund. Due to bond proceeds, $20 million wasn't necessary, so we hit that $10 million mark, and that's where we've stayed. So we will start to utilize a portion of that to wrap up the projects next year. We have a $7.6 million allocation in expenditures, leaving a little bit of a fund balance in there. Now this is a separate fund in Fund 48, but it really is just a sub-fund of the capital projects fund. So any unused monies in this fund would just be an inter-fund transfer back over to capital. Health Benefit Trust Fund, we've already mentioned that we're estimating a 5% increase in premium and that those new rates and plans will come October 1st. We are projecting a $34.5 million revenue budget next year and a $34 million expense budget. We do anticipate that utilization will also go up just based on historical trends and what we're seeing this year. And the GoCaps Fund. So seeing a slight increase in the estimating ending fund balance for next year at June 30, which is still recovering from kind of what GoCaps went through as far as the pandemic was concerned. We had a few partners drop out, and our fund balance did dip, and now it's starting to recover and catch back up. Tuition will stay consistent for next year at $1,125 per student per semester. We flew through that. Questions?
I have a quick one.
Yes.
On slide 28, the source of the funds for the capital projects, the fund balance carryover, the transfers from the operating fund, you know, like the 11 million transfer, and then revenue distribution. Interest, is that what the revenue?
Well, the interest income is a source of revenue, and then there's an M&M surtax.
I don't know what M&M means.
Purchase and manufacturers. So it's a type of revenue that we receive in from the county, and we can place that kind of at the board's discretion, either in the operating fund or in the capital fund. Last year, it was moved into the operating fund at the end of last year with the budget transfer, and then the budget recommendation last year had it in the capital projects fund. So if the capital projects fund got to a point where we felt like it was healthy enough, we could make the recommendation to go back over to operating.
So is that the major source of actual funding?
For capital?
Yeah, because, you know, fund balance and transfers, that's still our money, right? But is that is the M&M?
It's all our money, but yeah.
But I mean, the M&M is a true source of...
For capital.
For capital
projects. Because the interest nowadays...
Right.
Yeah.
It used to be something, right? But yes.
But the M&M
Yes, the majority of that 7.7 is M&M.
That of the estimated revenue is the M&M.
Like 6 million. Yeah.
It was merchants and manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
So they pay a certain percentage on manufacturing. Is that it?
I can get you some more details on that one.
It's actually a license that's renewed every year by Greene County. It's a merchant's license. And so businesses pay that.
It's the license. Okay. And thank you for the commentaries along the way. I find them very helpful. Materials.
The budget document, again, will have more detail, so whether anyone from the public or the board wants to dive in there, all the projected expenditures are now filled in. And again, as a reminder, the budget, the way a school budget works, we don't have line items specific, certain purchases or companies. It's a bigger pot of money, and then it goes through the KCOB process to the board as far as recommendation for purchases.
Scott has a question.
I just want to say a couple things. First off, Kara, kudos to your team for putting this together and all the hard work. I know a lot of effort goes into it. So thank you guys for that.
Yes.
It's great detail.
So, a couple things I want to ask. You had, is that correct? You had several small group sessions with all of us?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep.
Everyone was there? Okay. Was dissolving or dismantling the DEI department discussed during any of these meetings?
No.
None. Okay. That's great. Thank you so much. That answers my question.
And I would just kind of point out, I think the board got some information earlier today, but the budget that's reflected in here for the DEI department actually reflects about an $80,000 increase. That's basically salary increases through what we're going to be bringing. And then also the mentoring supports $50,000 that was referenced in here. So and then we also have a Grow Your Own program that has been added under that umbrella. So,
thank you.
Thank you for asking that question because I was only in our meeting, so I was confused as well. So I'm glad to be clarified.
All right. Great.
You were in the other meetings.
Was getting rid of technology discussed as a part of our budget meetings?
I do not recall that. Yeah. I'm going to say no as well.
Okay.
I don't even know what that means. Oh,
me.
hopefully getting rid of the deputy of operations never comes up either. So throwing that out there.
I don't know. It might pop up on Facebook.
Was that on your list, Scott?
That was a recommendation that didn't
No,
make it.
that didn't make it across. All right, well, we definitely appreciate the feedback that you as the board gave. It really, we want you to be thinking about the budget document and how it can be even better for you moving forward, and we'll start planning towards that for next year.
So before you sit down, so we'll just double check. All questions for now answered, because we have 2 weeks to look at this. I think we've all had lots of opportunities to ask you questions up to this point. But I like Scott's question that we've all had opportunities to have our individual times, and some of those have you spent hours with all of us. And this is the most in-depth budget I have seen in my years on the board. So thank you for spending the time.
Just to reiterate Kara's point earlier, state statute does require a budget to be adopted by the board no later than June 30th. So should for some reason we not approve it on the 21st, we will be scheduling more board meetings to get one approved. So, all right. Yes, ma'am.
Slightly related, but I'm a worrier. So I know our WADA is based on pre-COVID, but at some point, can you shoot us an email on what the WADA would have been? And so, does that make sense?
What the water would have been.
Absolutely. So once we close
What the
out,
WADA would have been, so that.
What are you
is the-
talking about?
Yeah.
What's the worst case scenario for FY24 is what I want to, and like, how can we encourage enrollment, move it up, like like if we don't get the pass again, where are we going to be? Because I'm a warrior.
Conversations have already started around that. It's
Did I say that wrong?
Numbers and strategies to make sure that those are increased for next year, because our hope is that FY23 becomes our highest WADA, right?
Right.
Yes.
Because then everything will be based on the 23 WADA.
so once this year is closed out, then we'll have that information to share. But the next 2 years, because really we've got 2 years to get it back to where it needs to be.
We have 2 years?
Right, because this next year we get to use 3 years ago, right? And
COVID
then the
did that.
following year,
Okay.
you can use that year if it's higher.
Right, because it's the
Prior
best
to.
of the last three.
Right. We'd really like to take care of it next year and get it to where it needs to be. So that's going to be a top focus.
Well, I guess I will worry less now.
All right. Thank you all.
We don't want you to worry at all. Okay, thank you very much. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to move on to 8.01, change orders and agreements. Now, we will need to take action on this item, so sell us, Travis.
Oh, yeah. Well, good news, there's 4 items that probably didn't take you a whole lot of time to look through, but actually this is a very celebratory item. We've had a few items lingering on what we've often called phase 2 of Sunshine, which we came back and did a couple $1 million worth of work. Roof, windows, doors, a lot of exterior items. And so we've had a few items lingering before we've been able to close that project out. And so what you'll see on this list is $105,380.43 of unused allowances that were part of that bid. So that's money coming back to the district that we will not spend on that project, which out of 1.75 million is a significant percentage actually. So in front of you are 4 items. You've got the phone system, part of the phone system component at Jarrett, finishing up on some safety security items at multi-sites for elementary, resulting in a deduct change order of $28,253.68. Any questions that I could answer for you on this list?
What's the addition of security cameras? It says multi-site.
Yeah, there's multi-site elementaries. Drew Stucco sent his team. There's been allotment out of the bond funds for safety security. It's been intercom systems, it's been cameras, phone systems throughout the district. And so their team has been putting those in throughout the last 2 years. And this is actually the final amount of that $2 million that's been allotted out of bond funds. And then he'll continue that work through capital, the capital budget over the next year. So I don't know the specific elementary schools, but that's where they're going also for these particular projects.
Thank you.
Any other because we do need to vote. So make sure that you feel comfortable with this. Anything? Okay, so at this time, the recommended action is that the board approve the change orders and agreements as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Sharita. Second? Was that a?
Sure.
Okay, Kelly, second. And so at this time, we'll take a vote.
I need to log back in for some reason. I think you need that. Yeah.
Steve's not popping up?
It's not popping up.
Okay, you want to give us a aye?
I got an aye.
Okay, motion carries. We'll move on. Superintendent's update.
Yes, yesterday was day one of our Explore program. We have 9,400 students registered. So I'm really excited about that. We hope to top 10,000. So if there's 600 students out there, please come on in. We'll accept you so we can get to that number. But thank you to all the staff members that agreed to work our Explore program. We're also gearing up for our Back to School Bash, which is scheduled for Saturday, July 30th from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock at the Expo Center. And so additional information will be pushed out to parents and community members. And board members, the date has already been held on your calendar. So once again, that's Saturday, July 30th. Thank you.
Is that an all day? Tell me.
From 9 to 3.
9 to 3. Okay.
Hey, that was
it.
Sweet. Okay, and I'm guessing because we had such a long legislative update at our last meeting, we don't have
No update.
anything to report? Okay. So now we're going to move to 10.01, and I do believe we have some board comments tonight. And so at this time, if you'll give me a little, or if you maybe change your mind or you have something that's in your mind. So, yes.
I have some board comments. Just, I think these are comments that are addressed about how our board should behave. So I have some concerns about board members making public and social media comments that are naming individual personnel from the district. That is something that we should not do, where we are naming individuals and calling out their roles or responsibilities. As our previous board president, Alina, said often, we have one employee that we direct or oversee, and we collectively work with our superintendent to meet the needs of the districts, and we don't address or make comments in public forums about individual work, personnel for the districts. And I also want to point out that we are not employees of the district, and we are not privy to carte blanche access to meetings and advisories. That is not our responsibility. We are invited to some, and those are the ones that we should be attending, but we do not have carte blanche access to district meetings and advisory committees. That's not our job. If they invite us to come, we are welcome to come, but otherwise that's not a part of our duties. Also wanted just to make a comment about diversity, equity, and inclusion. While it was not something that was discussed in our budget meetings, just because you don't discuss it directly doesn't mean that it's not a part of an agenda. And so I'm not saying that it is or is not. I'm just saying that it doesn't require that we had a discussion in our budget meetings for it to be something that is an underlying theme that may be coming through in some of the comments that are made even in our own meetings. There are these perspectives that we have out there, and those perspectives include things like what we call a deficit position versus a difference position. And those deficit positions come out in the way that we talk about groups and people and individuals, and it makes it clear how one feels about different groups of students, including our underrepresented and under-resourced students. So when one has, including teachers, these deficit perspectives about students, it shows up in your language, it shows up in your teaching, which is why DEI is necessary. Even those with good hearts and good intentions don't understand how their language impacts the way that they interact with others. And so it's important that we do and continue to support those efforts if we want to make those differences. So those are just some of the comments that I had. I wanted to make sure that I shared those because they were kind of things that are continuing to come up, and I think we're moving away from expected behaviors and expected roles and responsibilities of this particular board.
Okay. Steve, do you?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the community task force. You know, it's come to my attention that we as board members can actually offer up a recommendation of someone that we would like to see on that task force. And I know that there may be some attrition on the task force coming up for this community task force for their facilities, for the bond issue coming up, and I'd like to be able to see if we have an opportunity to have, I may have more than one that I would like to see on this task force. The list that I've received is there's 25 on that list right now. The real question is how many of those 25 still are on there? Is there going to be any attrition? And if that's the case, how is it, who actually makes the decision? Is it the board that actually makes recommendations from people from the community to get on the task force and that? And if that's our role and that's our situation, I would like to be able to make some of those recommendations, which has been offered to me, but I didn't know if that was solely the board's responsibility at all.
Trying to write all these questions down.
That was a lot of questions, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Okay, I think I've got a couple of those. Okay. All right. We'll keep moving around. Scott, do you have some board comments?
I don't have it.
Okay. Mary Ann? Okay. Kelly?
Also on the item of emails coming through about a task force on facilities, I think it's really important as we explore the possibility of, I don't know what we call it, but continuing a bond or another bond or whatever it is that this task force is tasked with. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the intent of it would be to identify if there is a need, and if there is a need, what that need looks like and how to address it. And I think that that would be our responsibility as a board to make sure that we're doing our due diligence if we are going to, in the future, put something forth to the voters in terms of a bond. As this task force is made up, I think it's important that we, if it's our board's task force, if I'm understanding that correctly, it's the task force that we put together, not staff, correct?
I don't believe that's the case. It's not the board's advice task force, I don't believe. But maybe I'm wrong. It belongs to the board.
Right.
So the board appoints all the people on there.
Wait, so it does belong to the board? So let me get all my questions and then I'll go back and try to answer, since I think I'm the only one here that remembers that process, so I think I have some information, but I want to finish.
So to finish up my statement on that, if this is a task force that we as the board are putting in place with the task of saying, you go research this and tell us if this is something that's needed and what we need to do, then I think this board should have an equal 1/7 say in what that task force looks like. And if we operate on the assumption that we had a task force and then we just have the opportunity to make a couple recommendations to add on top of it, I don't think the product we end up with is 1/7 say in that task force. I think there's a better way to arrive at that. And it may look something like each of us make 4 recommendations, and some of those many of those recommendations could be repeating members that were on the last task force, or maybe not. I don't know. But I would like to provide an equal say amongst this board for what that task force looks like to ensure that we are responsible in, and if we're ultimately going to the public to ask for them to vote on it, I think that us saying, look, we really did our due diligence with a sort of fair and equal group amongst our board that represents all different parts of the community, and they come back to us and say, hey, this is needed and this is why, then I think we've really done our job in selling that to the public of why it's needed.
Okay. I've got some questions
Do I get to
here.
go?
What?
Do I get to go?
Yes, you do.
Thank you. Just one comment about the task force is there would be some benefit to having members who were on the task force previously be on the new task force. Certainly they were successful in identifying the needs of the district and the community because our community voters passed the bond for us. I think some historical knowledge would be helpful on the task force.
Okay. Well, so I'm going to try to start here. Sharita, I think we always need some learning and some reminders, so I appreciate your comments. I do want to bring up the topic that you mentioned about board serving on district committees. And many of the district committees are work committees where they gather to do their work, not our work, but their work. So I know several board members have asked to serve on different committees. I mean, there's so many committee meetings per week that our staff have. Having been a staff member at one time, I know they work often, meet often. So I've visited with Granita and John and Nicole, and they are going to put together a list of committees that need and would like to have a board member serve, and these would be advisory committees. Not work committees, but those committees, and there are some committees that do need a board member, or it is a part of their function to have a board member as a liaison. So I thought that we could look at those at our retreat. So is that something you're okay with? Because we don't need to...
Kind of different from what we discussed, but
Well,
that's
okay,
fine if that's the
remind me.
request. Because
Remind
there
me
were
because-
not any, the conversation was around district-appointed committees.
Right.
Like you said, the working committees are the committees of the staff members to do their work.
Right.
When board members are on those committees, it changes the whole tone.
It does.
And people do not speak, and you can have a different perception. They don't speak freely. They don't go through and look at where our deficits are and then how we develop a plan around them. Because they're trying to sometimes cater to what they think the board member wants, and it just changes everything. So that was kind of the discussion we had, is that there is a different, like this community task force is a board appointed committee.
Right.
And that's a difference, and that's the struggle right now. And it also is a struggle right now because of the fact that we are trying, it is a new administration, we're trying to get the work done, address issues that have been raised by board members, and address student outcomes. It's hard to do that when people don't feel free and able to do their work.
So if they're, and talk with staff, and if you could come back to us with, here are some potential liaison positions. I think there's a Kids First that might have a...
Yeah, that's an update. So it's not really a committee that's making recommendations. That's just, we bring groups of people together.
And that may be what...
I think you attend that one. I might be
Right.
wrong.
And that could be, those could be the kinds of things that we can look at. So we can have that conversation at our retreat.
Yes, and I didn't have a comment, but I feel like I need to make a comment. Did you make that comment because I attended the wellness committee?
No.
Okay. Because that was...
No, there have
was
been
on the-
several different board members that have asked
So
about
can we
committee
assume
attendance.
that when something is on the district website, like all these committees that are meeting, I have no idea what they are, but this one was actually advertised, and there were several stakeholders who showed up, so.
But we also have to recognize, us sitting up here, any district room we walk into, it's going to change the dynamic, and I think we need to be cautious and aware of
Sometimes it
that.
changes that dynamic for the better.
Sure, but I also don't want to step on any toes or make people feel uncomfortable because we're in that room and they can't really express what they want to express.
But this brings up a good point for us to have the administration talk about it and bring it back to us at our retreat, because it is on the retreat agenda to talk about serving on various committees if there's a need.
I think this is great. If there are certain task force or whatever groups meeting that you think it would be best for us not to take part in, it would just be great to know what are those, and then if there are board appointed groups, then maybe we can. It would just be just communication, and we'd like to know, and I certainly don't want to feel like I'm overreaching or stepping on anyone's toes. I want to be able to trust the district to do what they're doing at the same time, but also at the same time, some of these, like the board task force, I want to make sure that we're appointing the best people so that we can come back and we're trusting them to come back and provide a recommendation. I mean, yeah, it's fine.
Sometimes having that balcony seat, I mean, going to that wellness committee opened my eye. I mean, I already knew the answer to all the questions you were asking, and I'm coming at this with so much more insight, so much more knowledge at this level. Not interested in the weeds, but this, 30,000 foot view sometimes is achieved through that.
Okay, so then I'm going to move on to
Bias. Oh, nothing.
Steve.
If I could speak to that, I'm sorry. Can I
Yes,
speak
go
to that?
ahead.
I just
Yeah,
think
sure,
those
Scott.
committees, when we go in and attend this, and I think you were getting it, that we bias. It all comes down to biases. We may have some knowledge in there, but they're going to look and see what we think, and they're going to change their opinion based on what they think we want them to say, or what we want to hear.
And they're probably not going to feel real free to express their opinion.
Right, they
as
aren't.
much as they would.
Mm-hmm.
Having been there.
I haven't experienced it, although I don't have a lot of experience attending. I've only
But you're not a
attended
part of the
two.
staff, so that's why you haven't experienced it.
They bring that
assure
back
you-
to their leader. So that's where, like I said, they bring back how they feel their concerns to either the person they report to, or then it bubbles up to me as a superintendent. So they're not going to tell you they feel uncomfortable with any board member being in the room or being on the committee. They bring that back to the proper channels, and that's where the disconnect is. They are not
I've
going
seen
to
a lot
oversee.
of lively conversation and action, and I just haven't seen that. That's my perception.
Okay, all right, good. Now then, I've asked for a little help to move on with our task force. So it has come to my attention that there's some discussion on the board with continuing the task force on our community task force on facilities as it exists. So with that in mind, I want to just provide a little perspective on the origin and purpose of the initial task force, and I think we can move forward. So the Board of Education deployed, so we approved the deployment of the task force on facilities in 2018. That came after the bond in 2017 did not, by a small margin, did not pass. So the board voted to deploy a community task force. So at that time, the board officers appointed 29 individuals to the community task force based on feedback from board members. So the board officers asked for each board member. I was not a board officer at the time, but they asked for all board members to provide names of individuals from parents, staff, students, community members, and I do recall that we were asked to provide people from a variety of regions of the district, and also to include those that were opponents of our bond and opponents of the bond. So we wanted to get a very variety of individuals in our community. So from that, they sent out emails to those individuals asking them, would you be willing to serve, because it's going to be very time intensive. So 29 people ended up agreeing to serve. Those individuals met from June 14, every other Thursday night through October 4th. So it was extremely time intense, and people were there and they bought into that process. So the driving question was this: what facility improvement projects need to be completed to ensure all SBS students have access to safe and quality learning environments? And that came from a very extensive study of the district's facilities by an independent consultant. And Travis, help me. MGT, what does that stand for? Okay, you weren't there. So. Yeah. And if any of you are interested in that, we still have the folder. That's all this. Okay, MGT. So all this work wasn't just pulled out of a hat. It was a lot of work that went into this process. So as the board appointed the membership, 2 board members were selected to represent the board just to serve as liaisons. And I was one. And so that not everyone wanted to spend every other Thursday night for the entire summer serving on this group. So the meetings were all open to the public, minutes were taken, and then all were shared on district's website. And they're still there, I think, for review. Is that correct, Stevens? They're still there. Okay. And again, individuals are chosen deliberately to represent varying viewpoints, and they include vocal opponents and proponents to the bond initiative. So a lot of time put into that. I do not believe our superintendent attended a single meeting. It was all led by the facility task force co-chairs. As I'm looking out in the audience, I'm looking to see, do we have any original task force members here? And I know we have one that here, and one here, and I know we had one that attended most every meeting back there. Carl? So, okay, so there's still a few of you around with me, so no one on the board, but okay. So then, in addition, the board and administration have continued, here's another piece, to keep that Phase 1 Community Task Force on facilities updated. So every time we have a bond project update, that group gets together. Now, I say every time, almost every time, right, Travis? Twice a year, they come back together, and we have a lunch if it's available, or an after school or after work meeting, because this group, they are so, they have held us accountable for the fact that that when they brought their recommendation to the board and the board voted to move forward with a recommendation, they have held us accountable for first of all, they decided, yes, we do need to move forward with a bond, and 2, here's how we want this bond to look, and 3, here's the priority of the schools that we want to be renovated or rebuilt. Exactly. Am I saying this correct, Travis, and how they want this done? So, in fact, another thing that brings us up, other than for board members that have asked me about this, the next quarterly update has been scheduled for July, because we did not have one in March, which was when John helped me, when we normally would have, because we had a lot going on.
We did a final meeting for Phase 1.
Oh, okay.
Where we gave the committee an opportunity to group.
Okay.
We basically said that was going to be the last meeting
Of Phase 1.
Task force would
Okay, and then I do believe that we sent out an ask of how many want to stay engaged, and then how many are ready to say goodbye and move on. So that has come back, and Tammy, you have that list of those that have asked, please, we want to stay engaged, because it's become a mission for them to stay engaged in that process. So knowing that, and out of where we are now, in this, what's coming before us, I am going to include this discussion on our June 21st agenda. So we need to, as a board, have this discussion that we've just had a little bit of tonight. So that will allow us to learn more and discuss in depth, maybe have some of the documents before us of what this committee was all about and what they did and where this board wants to move forward. It can maybe alleviate concerns or determine how we move forward, because I am all about, when stuff like this comes forward, that it needs to be on agenda item or public discussion. That will happen June 21st. John, can you share any more at this point to help me out here?
Yeah, no, I think that if we're looking at if we're going to proceed with an April
23 bond issue, which was what the original plan for Phase 2 was, then we would want to reconvene that task force at some point this summer. So that was the intent, to reconvene them around July, let them do their work. It should not be as extensive this time because we already have the script, so to speak, for Phase 2 and 3, and then they would bring back a recommendation to the board no later than September for the board to consider. And then ultimately it's up to the board to vote whether to place an issue on the ballot. So that was the plan. And so on the 21st, we'll try to get our co-chairs to come and also be able to share kind of a little bit about the committee, let you ask questions. I obviously was not here during any of that, so I don't have that lens to look through. But we'll get that all set up and be able to answer your questions on the 21st.
When would the board vote for that to be on the ballot? December or something?
It is, I think it's December, it might be January, actually, is the deadline. Typically, the vote would happen in December, and it allows us to get the language taken care of and certified.
Language has to be prepared and I think taken forward by January, I think.
Yeah, just like the third week in January or something like that. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Did he just say Phase 2 and 3?
Mm-hmm. What year is Phase 3?
It's currently scheduled for 2026.
2026.
However,
so every 3 years.
However, we would definitely recommend moving that to 27. And it should actually be every 4 years.
Okay.
Because we don't believe we get all construction done.
Ah.
So we would recommend if the task force reconvenes, maybe moving that.
So as we move forward, there could be some folks that drop off and open more slots, but we certainly need to have that discussion. So
Thank you for providing more context and also for the opportunity to discuss this further and have time to digest it and discuss it. I think the more we can discuss these things, the better. Thank you.
that's why I want to put it forward, and I think it will also be great if we can get our co-chairs here, or maybe even some of the but some of those committee members that might want to share in the discussion. We'll see.
And there's lots of information still on the website about each of the, like when you all met, the final recommendation.
All there. Yep. Every meeting, it was all there, and it was a long process. And just we brought a group together that had some very different ideas and thoughts about whether we would have a bond or not do a bond, because bond had just failed. And so do we even go this way, we don't go this way, and lots of different ideas. And by the end of that time, that group come together and had a very clear recommendation to bring to the board. And almost every one of those members sat in those seats and spoke to us, each one. I'm looking back there, I see some smiles, and told us very clearly what they thought we needed to do. And there were also field trips involved in those meetings to go visit these schools that had greatest need. And so it was quite a process. And so, okay. Any other comments? But I appreciate those that are here, and the more we can bring these things forward and talk about them, the better. So, okay. Anything else? Okay, now I need to get back. My computer went to sleep. Not me, but my computer went to sleep. Okay, upcoming meetings. I have another here. Friday, June 10, MSBA Igniting Great Ideas. They have a conference. So, show of hands, who's going to the conference? Great learning. Excellent. Okay. So we have Dr. Muhammad Khani, here I am, and we have Danielle, and we have Sharita attending. And you delegates, I've forgotten the delegates. Sharita's the delegate. Thank you for going and representing us.
I think the two of us are delegates. Or no, you're the delegate, I'm the backup.
You're the?
No, you're the backup.
No.
Danielle. She's the director.
Is on the board of directors, so you will be.
We'll be there.
You will be there.
Correct.
Are you
That's
going
it.
to be there?
Yes, I thought we
Yeah,
have
right,
two
yeah.
delegates.
We do.
Alternate. Okay.
You're the delegate. You're
The two of us are.
Mary Ann, you're going to be there? Yes. Okay, good.
I raised my hand. Did I? I'm sorry. No, you did. You did.
Oh, double check.
Who's on first?
Okay, Steve, are you going? Are you attending? You're not. Scott, Kelly, you're not going. So these are great meetings. There's so much to learn because there's people from all over the state there, and they are, they'll have all kinds of great stuff to learn. Okay, and then Tuesday, June 21st will be our next regular meeting, and please, we have a really big item ahead of us, and that is our budget, because everything now forward depends on our moving forward this budget. So any questions, doesn't matter how small, please ask for clarification, because we have one of the finest staff in, I think, the state, and they can answer those questions for you, and they're willing to, and they will do so. So, anything else? Okay, so I'm going to move on. I've said enough. Plus and deltas, things that have worked well for this meeting, and things that you would like to see us do a little bit better job of. And so, put that on your Post-it. Give that to Tammy. That would be good. And then we need a vote to go into executive session. The board, so the motion, this is an action item, so the motion is the board meet in executive session following this meeting to discuss collective bargaining matters as provided in section 610.021, 9, and 12 RSMO.
I'll move.
Thank you, Scott. Do I have a second? Sharita. Let's vote.
I'm wondering, did you sign into the?
I'm logged in.
You are logged in. Okay, because I was just wondering, maybe.
Not me.
Denise, you might need.
That's an aye for me, Tammy.
Steve's and I.
I'm logged in. It says.
Okay, so
Yeah.
motion carries, and so at this time we are adjourned.